KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan, Tillium Mining Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you today, my friend?
You don't go with frack?
No.
I thought it's a little cliched.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wanted to be unpredictable. I understand.
Right. I don't know. Just think of something here. How's life? How's it going?
Everything's good. You know what? Yeah. This kind of dovetails with a very special event going on the last day of school for everybody in my house.
Oh, that's exciting.
Not me. I don't give a shit about school.
Yeah.
I dropped out after 12th grade.
School's for suckers. Yeah, you did.
School's for nerds.
Yeah, school is for nerds and suckers. Well, that's very exciting. Your wife's obviously a teacher. You have 2 school-age children, so...
They just got off the bus.
Let's put them back on.
Yeah,
September. It's September. Bye.
I told Graydon they emailed last night and said there's an additional week of school on the fly, but he wasn't.
He didn't believe you?
Now they're at the age where they don't buy that kind of stuff. At least 4 or 5 years ago, I could have worried them with that.
Right.
Now it's just like eye rolls, that type of thing. The bus driver, I'm going to miss the bus driver. I'm going to tell you, Kyle, this guy, you could set your watch to this guy. Punctual as the day is long. Sweet man. Sweet man. Just a really nice guy. Always hello, good morning. Pick up in the afternoon, have a great day. And actually, I always forget this. One of Graydon's friends in the neighborhood, it's his grandfather, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, this little guy in the neighborhood's grandfather. And he's just a really nice guy. And it just reminded me of the quality of bus drivers I had growing up. Like we all pulled together, all the parents at the bus stop, get them a night, everybody chips in a little bit, get them a nice Target gift card or something, $50 gift card or something. I can never see mom and dad doing that for the bus drivers when I grew up. I had one bus driver. Did I ever tell you about the bus driver I had growing up?
I don't know.
This was in elementary school.
Yeah.
So somewhere in the throes of K through 3, Brookhaven Elementary, Brookhaven, Long Island. We lived in Medford. So what is that, like 4 or 5 miles away? There was a period of time where the bus driver would stop and pull over to the side of the road en route home in the afternoon because she got so aggravated with the kids. And I'll never forget this woman because she looked like Darth Vader. Now, follow me now. I don't know why or how she looked like Darth Vader, but she just had, and I don't mean this to sound mean, but she had this triangular shaped mouth. And like a grill, like you could always just see her teeth, like her mouth was always open, so it just kind of harkened back to like a Darth Vader look, and she was always pissed. I don't think I've ever seen her smile. She was a little bit on the heavy side, kind of rough and tumble, like the denim jacket, the jeans, denim jacket, maybe work boots, that type of look, and glasses, like big, 70s bifocal joints, and every day she would get so pissed off. I don't even know what she was angry at. I really don't. But, it got to the point where I usually wasn't the one in trouble, so I would look forward to it. Because it was like a little bit of drama every day.
Right.
Like she's going to pull over. She's going to take, she pulled over. The bus, maybe she turned the bus off, take her seatbelt off, and then she would walk back down the aisle and just, chastise whoever she was angry at. And I just can't see that going on today. First of all, for a bus driver to get that invested, I guess if the kids are being unsafe or something, it makes sense. But like for a bus driver to get that invested every day to like take her time, take our extra time, like just, I'll never forget that period. I'll never forget her look. Like it's really emblazoned in my mind, like how she looked, how angry she was, her Vaderish sort of face. I don't know. I was just thinking about that.
It's funny because I don't remember like any of my
bus drivers.
I was
going to ask you.
But it's important to note that I was only on the bus from kindergarten through 3rd grade, and then I never took the bus again because in Maine I lived down the street from the elementary school I went to, which was through 4th grade, so I was there just for 1 year, and then the middle school was even closer to my house, so I was there for 5th and 6th grade. So you just walk or bike.
Right.
7th and 8th grade I was in private school, and I would get driven to that. So
spoiled.
And then 9, 10, 11, 12 at Bellport and just walk to school. So I do remember it was bus 34. That I do remember. That was the one that went down Old Stump. But I don't remember the driver. And I do remember it was like a big deal when they got the flat front buses. Like at some point they cycled those in, and then they had like seat belts in them, but they didn't have to wear them. It was like very weird.
That was a big thing, like the Euro style bus. It looked like a Playmobil bus.
Right, exactly.
So what is this? What is this crazy France?
Get this shit out of here. This is more. So, Dig, before we get into the topic at hand, it's a big topic.
Big topic.
I wanted to just, I wanted to have a soliloquy of sorts for the humble cashew nut. Huh. Now, you know that I have just a hankering for the cashew, going back to my youngest years. Me in my boxers, with my comforter, on the couch, with a 2-liter of Coke, and a big thing of Planters cashews. That was me.
A big thing. I mean, like a Costco thing.
Right. Just fucking hammering those things. Just 2-liter gone, cashew bin gone, 7,000 calories or whatever. Well, it was gone.
Oh,
and
beautiful.
I just was thinking about it yesterday because Mike is very kind. She always buys me things that she knows I like, and I have a hankering for everything, flavoring, everything bagel style flavoring.
Sure.
And then I love cashews, and she discovered these cashews at Target that are like everything cashews. Okay. And I ate the entire. She bought 4 bags of them, but I ate the entire bag yesterday, and I did the math. I want to make sure I got it right here. There are 7 servings at 700. No, I'm sorry. Let's see. 170 times 7.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's not right. That math is totally wrong.
This is calories.
170 times 7. There we go. Yeah, 1,190 calories. That was just my evening snack last night. What? Was this entire bag of cashews. And I had to give a little bit of a soliloquy to the cashew because
delicious.
I adore them.
They're so good.
They're amazing. And I was kind of remarking that how is it possible? Have you ever seen a cashew before growing in the wild?
No, I don't think I have.
You should look. Because
look.
It grows off of a tree in a fruit.
Okay.
And then off the bottom of the fruit is the cashew.
What?
And the fruit is like discarded or used in like local delicacies and stuff where they're grown in the Southeast Asia and all that.
Okay.
And we just get the cashew, which is then shelled. So the little cashew is just one part of this really complex fruit. And I just always remark, they've always been kind of more expensive than most nuts, with the exception of like macadamia nuts and stuff.
They are expensive, yeah.
But I still think, I'm like, they're still really cheap. Considering how much work goes into this and how they're not domestically cultivated and all of that. I was just remarking at the wonders of the capitalist system and how this is possible, and they're grown all over the world.
Oh, they are?
It's kind of interesting. I love almonds. I love all sorts of nuts except for pecans. I don't like pecans very much.
Okay.
But I love walnuts. I think walnuts are like totally underrated.
So good.
But the cashew is just, and the cashew's not, I know we're talking, it's not technically a nut, but I have Rush really in the I feed Rush cashews and he loves them.
He can eat those?
Yeah, I looked it up and he poops them out. Like it doesn't seem like he digests them. But, I give him one, every so often when I'm eating them, and he actually knows the container. So I've had to start I have to sneak around with him to make sure that he doesn't know, because we're pretty generous with our food with him.
Okay.
And
he eats the table food.
Yeah, but not like he does. We don't feed him from the plate, but if I'm making a cheeseburger, I'll give him a piece of cheese or
okay, yeah,
whatever.
Reasonable.
And he's around. He's a little bit of an asshole too. So he's a huge asshole actually.
He's a jerk.
He's a total jerk. But so I have a thing where I'm like, you want a cashew nut? And I just look at him, and just in that little. I'm saying it kind of quiet because I don't want him to.
That'd be great if he came in and got one.
You want a cashew nut? That's what I said, and then he sits up, and he's real barrel chested, so he sits up and looks all
oh my god
stately, and then I give it to him, and he just takes it, and then we always laugh because he takes his treats and then he runs away with them. And
of course,
privately.
That's a dog thing.
I love that. Yeah,
they have to go ferret it away or just act like they're not going to store it anyway. I don't know what they're doing. They're going to eat it.
No, although Micah does remark that every once in a while he does come out with something that we gave him a while ago. I don't know where he hid it. Yeah, we give him his beef sticks and stuff like that, and then I'm like, the beef sticks are gone, I think, and then 2 weeks later he'll just come out.
He has one.
Yeah, he has one just because we laugh because he definitely just has a routine and he just lives in this house and just does whatever he wants.
Yeah, that's his. Yeah, it's his stomping grounds. He has contingencies in case you guys run out of beef sticks. He's got to have a store.
Yeah, he. It's so funny, man. Like I can't wait for you to meet him because he's a real character, and I was outside like sweeping up because the pool guys have been in and out of my place, like just doing they just dropped like a shit ton of rocks off on my front lawn today. What the fuck is going?
It's just a pile.
It's just a huge pile of rocks. Like,
there's
and
a
I'm
plan
like,
for
all
those.
right, so this is the next step, I guess. So I'm out there like cleaning up, and I just look up at the window, and he has like a window that he likes looking at, and he's just looking at me, and like staring back down at me. And when he hears something out front, he knows to run upstairs. He always runs upstairs and just like looks out that window, and that's his little window. And he's eaten like half of the windowsill. So
he has. So because he's still in puppy mode.
Yeah, he isn't too destructive. I say that it's funny because the very first night I have this like beautiful kitchen island in the middle of my kitchen.
Oh, it's
and
so
nice.
nice.
The very first night he just bit the side of it, and I'm like, "What are you doing?"
It's so
like,
rough.
and just like when I got my couch, he immediately peed on it.
Yes, I remember that story.
First thing, just peed on it.
It's a little heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it's like, oh man. So he's totally not like that anymore, but he has this insatiable appetite for wood, and I kind of blame myself for it because we live, I think I've said this before, but we live in it's a new neighborhood, so it's all being built up. And when he was a little puppy, a lot of the houses around me weren't even done, and they were just being excavated and stuff.
Right.
And so we would go into these little things when he was a little puppy, and like he loved the wood, and he would just eat, like just chew on the wood and stuff like that. And I think from a very young age, he just got instilled in this.
He got a taste for it early.
Yeah, he loves it. He loves wood, and it's hard to like I go look for good sticks for him and stuff, and I felt bad for him because all of his good sticks got destroyed in the winter because the heat like disintegrate, dries it out. And stuff.
They get weathered.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't realize he's in his. He's in
there.
Yeah, he's in his crate.
He's enjoying some stories of getting a little shine, getting a little screen time.
I don't know if he can be seen, but
Kyle, did you know Graydon's allergic to cashews?
No, I didn't know that.
Our son is allergic to the two best nuts, and we try not to rub this in too much. He's allergic to cashew, and he's allergic to pistachios.
Oh.
It's as if he chose from the list.
Right.
Like, what are the two most delicious nuts?
Those are the best two. No doubt.
So good, right? Yeah, we knew because we got like a pre-made cashew encrusted chicken breast once from like Fresh Market or something. We took it home and ate it, made it for dinner. And around midnight that night, he woke up, dude, he was covered in hives. Now, thank God it wasn't like, an anaphylactic thing where he was like, his throat was closing up. Did I say that right? I don't know.
Yeah.
You guys will make fun of me if I didn't. Just like dwarf. But yeah, so he woke up with the rash, and then we had to have him tested. They do all the pins in your back and the whole thing. It's like kind of a heavy thing. And it was pistachios, which he never encountered, thank God. We found out first, and the cashew thing.
The cashew nut?
The cashew. The mighty,
that didn't wait.
Mighty cashew. Hopefully he'll grow out of it. Now, almonds, peanuts, he could eat all day. Walnuts, no problem.
Yeah, those are good. Those are also fine, but
they're reasonable.
Pistachios are... I hate buying pistachio, just the nuts, like the nut meat, as they unnecessarily like to call it. I hate that they call it that. But I have to break them open. Oh! I have to break them open myself.
Yes, that's the routine. You got to get the salt.
Yeah, and some of the pepper, if you get it, some of the peppered ones are pretty good too. I love black pepper. Put black pepper on anything. Black pepper and peanut butter sandwiches.
I'm sorry. What? Black pepper and peanut butter? Just peanut butter with the cracked pepper on there?
Yeah, really good.
What is this? Is this a Colin invention?
I don't know. I just feel like I learned.
I feel like it is.
Being young and not, mom and dad are gone, and you have like nothing to eat sometimes. Yeah. It's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to eat. That's why I discovered like peanut, or potato chip and mayonnaise sandwiches. I mean, I used to eat that, not because we were poor, but because it was like, I don't know, dad just doesn't buy anything.
You throw it together.
Dad's like, if it's not Honey Nut Cheerios and Chex mixed into the same thing, I don't want it.
Well, Dad bought what was on sale.
Right.
So maybe it would land in our favor and maybe it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Depending what was on sale that week.
So, yeah, the peanut butter, I just discovered that around that time, that this is good shit. Just goes together.
That's not a bad idea. I never heard of that before, but I'm going to give you that.
I mean, think about it. Pepper and peanut. It's
not bad.
Pepper, peanut, sugar. I mean, that's good. So
not bad, my friend.
All right, Dave. Let's take a sharp left turn here.
Let's do it. By the way,
inverse
colors on the shirts. We couldn't have planned that better.
Oh, that's really nice. Look at
I'm
that.
really enjoying that.
Yeah,
I keep looking at it. It's like a little bit of eye candy for you guys. I mean, besides...
It's Tomax and Zamon.
There it is. I even have the scar.
Yeah, you wanted the scar.
Where is it?
So you can have this. You can have the scar.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, you have the little scar on your
I
kid.
do have the scar there.
You do.
Right.
All right. Dig. Topic at hand.
Let's
do
do it.
One, I think. It's a meaty one. I've been excited about this.
I
Which
know
is
you
why I
have.
was so disappointed about... we were having technical issues before we started recording because I was just had to restart my computer and then it updated and... Just,
yeah. What's this Wii shit?
What?
By the way, Battlestar's playing. We didn't even reveal it yet. Sorry, I gave it away.
It's okay. Well, they know they clicked it. Oh, they clicked on it, so they know.
Okay.
The topic is Battlestar Galactica, the miniseries and season 1. So what we're gonna do, and I wanted to make sure to bring this up. What we'll do over the next couple of months, I think, is very similar to what we did for Breaking Bad, which was we did, I think, 3 episodes of Breaking Bad, if I recall. We're gonna do 4 episodes for Battlestar Galactica. And it's going to be something like, so the first episode is this one. It's the miniseries and episode or season 1. Then we'll do one just for season 2. Then we'll do one for season 3 and Razor, which is awesome. Razor's fucking awesome. And then we'll do season 4 and The Plan.
Okay.
So that's 4 episodes for the show. And I'm really excited to get I don't know, Dig, like this is one of my favorite shows. And watching it again, I was telling Micah, because she had never seen it, so we're watching it together. I think I've seen this season probably like 4 or 5 times around there.
Holy shit.
But as you get deeper into the series, I've actually only seen, I think, season 3 maybe twice, if that. And season 4 I only saw once.
One time, okay.
Razor I saw, I think, once. The Plan I saw once. So, and I love, by the way, that they've always accompanied. It's very, very ahead of their time in a lot of different ways. Like they accompany, it's almost like what Downton Abbey does. They accompany their movies with, or their TV shows with films.
Yes.
And it's very cool that they do that to continue the story and tell other side stories and stuff. It's also worth noting that they're apparently rebooting Battlestar Galactica. And it's also important to know that this itself is a reboot of Battlestar Galactica. And really a reimagining of it more than a reboot. So
yeah, absolutely.
Dave, let me throw it over to you. What do you think? I mean, what do you think of the show? Because having watched it this many times this first season, it really still holds up. It's a little low budget. It can get a little corny at times and all of that, but I feel like it is exceptional television and a lot deeper, I think, than people give it credit for, because I think people are so skeptical of science fiction. It's one of those shows that you hear a lot of. We got a lot of people writing in about it, about how it's like their wife loves this show, for instance, or whatever, because it's not really about the setting. It is science fiction. It is robots and spaceships, but it's actually much more relatable than that. It's not like Star Trek, although I know Star Trek was also very human and stuff.
Sure.
So what do you think about your first foray into Battlestar here, this miniseries and season 1?
Yeah, I was very excited to do this one because I know how much this topic means to you. You loved it from the beginning, and I couldn't wait to get into it. In fact, it's one of the only topics, I don't think it's the first time you've done it, but one of the few times you've done it on the show where you're like, you texted me and you're like, we're going to go 4 or 5 hours on this. Like, you were really legit excited for it.
I have so many notes, dude. Like, I just I can't so
wait.
Much. Yeah.
I think I'm going to learn a lot, too, from you with the whole thing because I'm totally new to it. Now, you'll remember you recommended the series to me when it first came out when we were younger. And I eventually did start getting around to it. I began watching it, not in 2004 or 2005, but probably to my best recollection, like 2007, 2008, because I remember Helene and I were in the old house at the time. On Sci-Fi, they must have been rerunning it. And I started it in season 1, and somewhere along the way in season 1, I tuned out. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Initially, I was really excited to watch it on your recommendation. You have great taste. And also because I was a big fan of the original Battlestar Galactica 1978/79 series. For me, that was a really meaningful one growing up when I was about 5, 6 years old when it initially came out. I might even be watching it a little later, like 7 years old or something. But I do remember how much it meant to me and my friend Tommy because we had just newly fallen in love with Star Wars, of course, right? And back then, no VHS, no cable movie channels, at least not in our family yet. So we'd watch Star Wars once or twice, and then the rest of it was just left up to our imagination. We wanted to watch it all the time, but the rest of it was playing or going to a Star Wars themed birthday party or wearing the t-shirt or whatever, just doing as much as we can, imagining it. So Battlestar Galactica, I remember as a little kid even realizing like, this is really Star Wars-esque in a cool way. Because even when you're a kid, you're kind of savvy enough, when you're kind of a young nerd, you're savvy enough to realize, all right, this is like, there's a lot of cruddy imitations of Star Wars, you know, whether it's like a cartoon series or a live action thing at the time. I really wasn't a big Star Trek kid as a fan. Like, I just thought it was too sciencey and cerebral for me. It wasn't fun enough, you know, or even like growing up, like the illustrations on the side of arcade cabinets, like you would see Star Wars influence everywhere, whether it was the ships or the characters or the swaggering gunslinger type guy with the laser blaster. And Battlestar Galactica, the original, always felt to me like it was taking a page or two or three out of Star Wars in the right way. You know, you had the stormtroopers, then you had the Cylon Centurions, you had the TIE fighters, and the approximation was the Raider, the Cylon Raider, right? And then you had the X-Wing and you had the Colonial Viper. So it felt like it was kind of, you know, copying Star Wars a little bit, but in all the right ways. And then it had enough of its own unique elements too. It had really great acting. It had the Han Solo-esque character, but they would dress it a little differently. It was a fun adventure series, although there was, you know, grave stakes about this evil race of beings that were trying to destroy the humans. And it even had things Star Wars didn't have. It had a little kid. It had a kid. It had a robot dog. So I thought it was super, super fun. And I remembered going into the series in the early, you know, to mid 2000s and saying, oh, I can't wait to see how much of the original series that this approximates for myself, which would be really, you know, it'll be a really good time, I think. And it felt different. You know, it felt like a you know, again, like you mentioned, a reimagining. And I remember thinking initially it was going to be like, I don't know, it was going to be along the same lines as the original. A little bit campy, a little bit like Star Wars, sort of a fun and colorful adventure. And it was a lot darker and a lot more cerebral, I think. And I got kind of turned off by it. You know, like maybe 4 or 5 episodes in, I was like, I don't know. You know, for some reason I just got sidetracked. Maybe I was watching something else or something. And, yeah.
So it's interesting because I think one of the major problems with the way they presented Battlestar back in the day, because I got into it, the first season had already happened, and then it was a person in college I went to that turned me onto it. Is this guy Brandon, who I was friends with, who also turned me on to Lost and a bunch of other stuff. He had a really good taste back in the day, and that was like kind of during the beginnings of network television starting to make great shows and cable TV the way that like the paid cable companies had been doing for about a decade up to that point.
Okay.
And we always lamented, and I lamented it with you even here, and I'll talk about it in a second, like they don't position the miniseries well enough so that people, I think, start watching Battlestar Galactica without watching the miniseries. I think it happens a lot.
That happened to me.
And I told you not to. It's so funny that you did that anyway, because I told you initially, I was like, watch the miniseries first, and then I said, did you watch the miniseries? And you were like, no, I was, and then I told you to watch the miniseries. You know,
I got one episode in, and I was like, this isn't right. And then the way I watch it on Peacock.
Right.
So the way Peacock has it, you have to search for the miniseries. It doesn't come up with the rest of the episodes. They have it a little bit strange up there. It could be a little cleaner the way they have it laid out.
They should present it in order that they should be watched, because like, you're supposed to watch Razor at a certain time and all of that.
Right.
And so Battlestar was actually very prominently an early and often used streaming show that was on Netflix very early. It was on Amazon Prime very early. That's how a lot of people got into it, and which is awesome. And I feel like especially they should have just made it episode 1, 2 so that the first season is 15 episodes. But anyway,
yeah,
I think I really feel like there's an appreciable percentage of people that didn't watch the miniseries and therefore have no idea what the fuck's going on by the time you get to the original show. So that's one thing. But yeah, I think the show it's not an easy thing to watch, because I think it first of all, I think, and we're going to talk about this, I think, a great deal. It's a very much a product of the post 9/11 environment. There's a lot of allegorical stuff in there. It's incredibly heavy-handed and obvious. I don't think that it needs to be like explained and you're going to be like shocked by it. I think a lot of people notice these things, but I do love the parallels, especially for you with the original Battlestar, and the kind of rise of sci-fi and how you were kind of looking for parallels with X-Wings and the Viper and TIE Fighters and the Raiders, like you said. So talk to me a little bit about, going in. I mean, first of all, let's start with because there's so much to say, but let's start with the miniseries itself. I'm kind of curious what you make of that series. It's really a lot about number 6 and Gaius Baltar and others, but I say that the opening minutes of the miniseries are amongst the very best TV ever, and I absolutely love the way that they introduce the show. They do so much exposition without taking very much time and using very much in terms of words. They basically say humans created these machines. The machines fought back. They had a war. They signed a peace treaty or an armistice technically, and they went their separate ways. And they build a space station where they're supposed to meet every year, and the Cylons for 40 years never show up. They've never been seen again since the armistice was signed. Cool. And I absolutely love the way they introduce it with number 6 coming in and asking the guy if he's real. It's incredibly deep because it's like she's never seen this model, like this version of the model has never seen a person, right? Not like number 6, not like Gaius is number 6, who has been around people for years. So it's not like that shocking. Like she can't believe that she's with a real person, and you see the Centurions with her. So what do you make of the way the whole saga begins?
It's so much fun. It's very thought out, very well crafted, very well written, and I like that it incorporates a little bit of that old Battlestar Galactica formula where it is a proper action adventure too. There's so much to be interested in and so much to be captivated by with it. There's a little something for everybody. And I love the backstory. I mean, it's so cool that you have this race of aliens, quote, alien robot creatures that were initially created by man that eventually rebel. And then man, humankind fights this protracted war with these turned insidious aliens. And then they just, these robots, and then they just, form some sort of, like you said, form some kind of peace negotiation. And there's 40 years of nothing, of there's no fighting, there's no war, and then all of a sudden the Cylons just come back and all but annihilate mankind, unlooked for, just completely come in and just destroy everybody, but basically a baseball stadium full of people, about 50,000 people. And I love everything about it. It's so clever. I love that there's, the humans have developed these 12 colonies. There's a sort of a battle cruiser or a battleship for that represents every colony. So they have this vast military fleet. And the Battlestar Galactica is this aging warship. It's all but decommissioned. It's in the throes of becoming like a museum. And that's the one ship left alive to sort of usher in whatever remaining civilians and civilian ships they could find to basically run from this impending doom, this impending superior race of robotic killers, basically. And it's awesome. And I love everything about it, like the way that it was a nuclear attack, but they also, like the Cylons also apparently attacked with like some sort of malware, like it was a cyber attack as well. And that the Galactica was so old that it wasn't even online with the other newer contemporary battleships. It wasn't even wired in, so it was spared from that cyber attack. Hence, and that's all that's here to left to defend mankind is this, this past generation warship, and they have to rely on that, and they have to go on munitions runs, and they have to basically stock up and then just run from this enemy, and completely unexpected. And like you said, I think it's also very important. It's so hard to do sci-fi right. We talk about all the good sci-fi that we've watched. We've done a lot of episodes on the proper sci-fi, Blade Runner, Alien, the good Star Wars movies, all that kind of stuff. Dead Space, right? Mass Effect. But this, I think, when you get good sci-fi, you and I often talk about this. It's grounded in a proper human drama. That's space opera. That's what space opera is. And this takes a page of all the great space operas, Space Cruiser Yamato, Macross, Star Wars, elements of Star Trek. The Alien movies are certainly, revealed in here with the Geiger-esque internals of the Cylon ships of the Raiders. And, you even get a little taste of Stargate, where it kind of crosses, kind of blends sci-fi with the ancient Egyptian or ancient Earth type, Greek gods, Norse gods, whatever type of elements. So I think you get all of that in this, and it's just sci-fi done right. It's grounded in a human drama with, character relationships, great characters, relatable characters, detestable characters, and it's imbued with a lot of mystery. You don't get a lot of answers. It does demand a lot of your attention. It demands a lot of your intellect. You really have to pay attention to the series. There's a lot of characters. There's a lot going on. There's a backstory that sort of reveals itself. It goes a little non sequitur, kind of goes out of order at times. So you have to kind of paste a lot together. But for me, it's a proper payoff. And I love what you said, too, about that it kind of walks the line sometimes of being corny and cheesy. I feel like it really flirts with crossing over that line. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes it flirts with that sort of line of demarcation with becoming a little bit of cheesy, cheesy sci-fi, what we know as cheesy sci-fi. But then it'll do something in a very timely fashion, and it'll bring you right back in and compel you and do something really cool and serious. And it really is funny how it toes the line that way. It almost feels like, I know that, what's his name? Ronald D. Moore comes out of a really strong Star Trek background. And sometimes it seems like Star Trek-esque elements are finding their way in. And it starts to feel a little like, all right, this might cross over into cheesy. And then it just sort of goes right in the opposite direction again. So it almost that formula, that sort of back and forth is almost compelling in itself, the way it does that. There was times where I would worry about that, where I was like, I don't know, like, I just don't know about this. And then all of a sudden it would just sweep you right back the other way with something that it did with the action or a character or an emotional, something emotional that happens between characters. And I could kind of chart that out for you as we talk about the episodes and the specific episodes, the 13 in season 1. But I had a great time from the miniseries on. And like I said, I got like 3/4 of the way through 33, through episode 1, titled 33, and then realized like I'm missing that this is not the miniseries. And then going back and realizing that the miniseries were like these 2 long episodes. Basically, the miniseries, the precursor, comprises a long feature film's length worth of content to give you enough bones, give you enough skeleton in order to jump in then to the seasons. But I had a great time with it. I mean, I had a great time with season 1 and the miniseries. I really think it's really good sci-fi. It reminds me of being a kid, where it's like something that we could have had on a weekly basis. And I think I really had I given this a chance, 15 years ago, I think I would have enjoyed it. I think I kind of stepped out too early.
Yeah, I can understand that. There is a sort of force for a show like this to, I think it's naturally gravitationally pulled towards corniness. I don't know why that is with a lot of TV sci-fi, where you start getting like, there's shows that I respected enough, like that I liked in some way, like Babylon 5 or Andromeda or something. But these shows are undoubtedly corny, UPN style schlock or whatever. And that's fine. They're fun. But I think Battlestar is a little more highbrow than that. And so I'm glad that they get away from that, because then it allows the thematic elements of the show, which I think are so important, to shine through. There's so many different ways we can go into this. And so I want to ask you what I think is maybe one of the most interesting questions after the first season. What do you think about the Cylons being a monotheistic force? The humans are polytheistic, and the Cylons come back. By the way, it's important to note the Cylons come back, annihilate humankind. It's noted many times, there is no condition in which they will accept surrender. The humans unconditionally surrender early on in the conflict, and the Cylons simply just want to destroy them. And it becomes clear at some point that they're religiously motivated, although we don't know the full extent of that as of the end of season 1. And I'm wondering, what you think of that, because that to me is one of the most compelling parts of this, and I love science fiction combining in some way with religion. I love that the Cylons, at least as we know now, they do believe in some sort of higher power, and I'm wondering what you make of that moving out of through the first season.
That's a really cool element. I can't remember ever seeing that in a science fiction story before. I'm not saying it didn't exist. I had never seen that, though, where the bad guy, or seemingly the evildoers, the antagonists, were almost fanatical religiously. And you get elements of that from the Sixth character, and from some of the other Cylons that we meet too, some of the other Cylon agents that we meet. It's really compelling stuff, because they really spoon feed you the information, at least through the first 13 episodes. Now, it's important for you guys to realize I haven't pressed ahead. I don't know anything of this era of Battlestar Galactica beyond the first season. I haven't gone even to season 2 yet, so I'm only talking from the context of season 1. But yeah, man, it's super compelling stuff. And it's like, you combine the monotheistic stuff with, the fact that there's elements of terrorism sort of involved with that. Almost like a cult-like fanaticism. Are they lying about it? Is it to throw the humans off? Is it a story because the humans believe their own things as well, which kind of gets back into like, I don't know, like a little bit of Christianity, but also like mythology. There's a lot of elements combined with the religious, all the religious elements combined into the show. But I thought that was a really compelling aspect of it, and something that you're kind of tuned in for. It's like, what are they, the Sixth character is showing up to Gaius, to Dr. Gaius, to the Doctor character, and almost in like this angelic way too, which smacks of Catholicism, Christianity. So there's a lot of really compelling stuff that, and you want answers, because it's not readily explained. Again, they spoon feed you episode by episode. Maybe you find out a tidbit here and there, and you're building on your knowledge. But then you're even wondering, like some of the characters in the show, you're even wondering what's real and what's not real. What's an hallucination? What's a trick? How much of the bad guys deceiving the colonials and all that kind of stuff. So you really don't know going in. In fact, going out on the end of episode 13 leaves a lot of questions in the air, which is good television.
Yeah, I totally agree. I am intrigued. Now I know how it resolves, but I am intrigued by, and still just watching it, the idea that this robotic race is created. We don't really know how protracted the war is, although there is a spin-off called Caprica that's not really important to watch. It was canceled. It was on after this, where they get into like the people who made the Cylons.
Yeah,
but which is cool in and of itself. So
that's cool.
They've not been around for that long, but they fight some sort of protracted war and go off on their own. And all we know at this point is that they went off on their own and they found God. And it's a pretty cool thing. And they come back with the belief that they are absolutely right, and that the humans must be completely killed. And in fact, it's one of the things that I think the show does badly, or not well enough, which is they really skip over what I think is really fundamentally important aspect of the Cylon kind of inner conflict. We only see a little bit of it here, but where they don't really know if they should continue to chase humans or not. There's that conversation early on in one of the episodes where some of the agents are speaking on Caprica, and they're like, why don't we just let these guys go? Like, who cares? And we won. Like, we totally eliminated their entire life and the entire way. We seized their planets. They're gone. And some of them are like, no, they'll come back and get us. There are this contingent of Cylons that are actually still afraid of humans and what they're capable of. And one of the things I think the religious aspect of it allows us to explore is the spiritual nature of, let's say, how do I put this, Dave? The spiritual nature of the little things of consciousness that you can see the Cylons struggle with.
Yes.
And it kind of gets into it with Hilo and Sharon on Caprica, but the Cylons are really interested in love, and they bring it up a lot. if you start paying attention to these things, they're like, Six asks Sharon at one time, does he love you? You know, like it's the same thing. There's this, and I especially love this about number 6, is that model is sexual and sensual, of course, but incredibly curious about human nature. And they know in the back of their minds that they're programmed in some way. They're not silica. They bleed, and there's nothing about them that would indicate that there's something different that can be found. That's why the whole emphasis of the Cylon detector that Baltar is working on. Because you can't just cut them open or give them a blood test and figure it out, although he figures it out later.
Right.
And so the Cylons are built knowing, and we don't know, you've not seen much of them yet. And that's why I'm so excited for you, because you're going to be so excited when you see more of the Cylons awesome. And what they're doing. Wait. But I feel like this chase after the ethereal nature, things that humans only think about. And the Cylons know that love isn't necessarily innate. It's something that is nurtured in you and brought out in humans as part of nature. I think humans are probably, if you're just born a human and not taught anything, I don't know what happens to you. I think you just become like a wolf person or something, you know, like there's so much nurture in it. And the Cylons realize that they lost all of that and that it can't be taught. And it's fascinating to watch it bubble underneath the surface for them. It gets more and more prominent until it can't be ignored anymore. But what do you make of that whole thing about their chase, especially number 6, being very curious about humanity, like the actual humanity, and having almost this zoological like interest in these things that humans do that they simply can't wrap their minds around? That's why it's so important, for instance, that Sharon is pregnant.
Yes.
And they'll get much more into that.
That blew my mind at the end.
Because the baby is half Cylon. So anyway, talk to me a little bit about that.
I really wanted to see a little Cylon Centurion in the crib. I was just hoping there would be like a little robot with the bib and a little doily, the bonnet.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. No, there is something so cool about the conflict between the Cylons and the humans in here, because like you said, the Cylons they're not just that typical, sci-fi B-movie race of bad guys that are like, stomp puny human ants, they must be destroyed. Like there's conviction in what they're doing, and you could see that. And also that they have all these human-like qualities. They obviously know fear. They're a little afraid of the humans. They're curious. They're very interested in love and sex and physicality. And we see them, emote jealousy. We see aggression. We see even sympathy and empathy and stuff there. And you see that they are developing some sort of consciousness, which is interesting to me, which really keeps compelling me to go back for the backstory of like, why did human create these things? Were they designed to be helpers in some way? And now maybe these questions get answered eventually. We don't get a whole lot of that. Yeah,
to jump in real quick, they do get more into how poorly the humans treated the Cylons. Like,
oh, that's interesting.
Because that was one of the things that caused the conflict. When the Cylons fought and went away, they were all robots. Yes. And there's a lot of questions about, which I don't think are frankly ever answered, about like their organization and all of that, and like who's their leader, and like a lot of it. That's where the religious shit comes from later, and you learn about that with them. Okay. And they make their own human models to come back, because that's the way they infiltrate, obviously, the colonies in the years to come. Remember, of course, number 6 is working Baltar for years, for several years.
Yeah.
To get the access to the defense mainframe, which he does.
Fascinating shit.
So I just wanted to say that they get into that, but I did want to note that it comes out, and it is important, and I don't think it's a spoiler because they don't get like into the nitty gritty, but that the humans enslaved basically the Cylons. It's not like
that's what it's
not like the Cylons were just like, Rosie or something like that. Yeah, they were like enslaved, and they were given, or at least gained, some sort of consciousness and fought back. So there is a fascinating thing there. And so the Cylons have a lot of built-in anger because they've been told that they were mistreated, like that the humans created them just to enslave them, and they gave them consciousness and tried to lock them down. That's where the whole basis is. So I find that quite fascinating myself.
That's so interesting to me. And what's interesting about that too, Kyle? I think episode 3, you could see it echoing still in the way the humans treat the prisoners on that prison ship, because they want to use them in order to harvest the water do this really dangerous job. And it might be the same thing. It's like echoing how they were with the robots. It was like, you guys are tools. They referred to them as toasters, later on, which is not a new thing in sci-fi.
That's like that was like their what would be a good, I'm not trying to be racist, but just to give it an example, and that's where frack comes from too, which is obviously fuck, but it's like them saying so Charlie or kraut.
Great point.
Right, that's exactly what they're saying.
It was a derogatory, racist term, to call them. And, so they're not your typical, quote unquote, typical sci-fi bad guy, the Cylons. They're really interesting. And we know, too, like you said, there was an evolution somewhere where they did look like these metallic Cylon Centurion things, and then they eventually evolved. The opening, I have it written here, which always compelled me because it's very short, but it says a lot. The text over the opening credits, at least in season 1, says the Cylons were created by man, they rebelled, they evolved, very important. There are many copies, and they have a plan. So we have that at the beginning of every, a little crawl in the beginning of every of the 13 initial episodes, at least. It's very interesting that there was, there's a lot that goes on where they evolved, and now there's numerous copies, and it's just the insidious nature of having an enemy that could blend in with you and completely hide in plain sight. That's a thing that's been in sci-fi, a body snatcher-esque type of thing, but something really insidious, because once they're embedded, they could sabotage, they could terrorize, they could get inside information, they could gain confidence. It's really, really interesting. You realize what this baseball stadium full of humans are up against, and it's like, this is gonna get heavy. This is not gonna be an easy battle, an easy fight.
It's funny you keep bringing up the baseball stadium too, because that's exactly the way I visualize it as well. It's like,
isn't that
basically,
funny?
Basically, yeah, just a Yankee game or something like that. That's how many people are left.
It's amazing.
It's awesome, and it's cool too that the Cylons didn't seem to be worried about or really care about the people that were going to be in interplanetary space at this time. We don't really know the nature of the colonies, like how many systems they spread out over, and how many planets they have, because like Sharon keeps saying she's from Troy, but that's not even one of the planets we know about. That might be like a moon, because all the planets are named after astrological signs, the 12 astrological signs. So what do you make of the polytheistic religion of the humans, specifically the connection to human astrology, and this idea of Earth, this 13th planet that they apparently have ancestors that went to? What do you make of that whole arc? It's really important to the show, and it's actually not something that is developed a whole lot in the first season, but it is something that's obviously mentioned. We know that Adama lies to everyone and says he knows where Earth is. He obviously doesn't. And by the end of the show, or the end of the first season, they arrive on Kobol, which is where shit starts getting real and people start believing, because Kobol is where, is an important location in their religion and kind of their finding of Earth. So everything starts to be kind of encapsulated in that. So talk to me a little bit about, on the other end, we have this polytheistic. See, what I think is so interesting about it is that polytheism is typically looked at as old, arcane, pagan, and yet here those that you would think would be in this driver's seat are polytheistic. They say, my God. I love it too. Like, oh my gods, and God, thank the gods. And like, I love that kind of stuff. There's a lot of cool attention to that. And they seem to have their own religion that is ingrained in them too. Although outside of the black woman, that's kind of like the mystic and a few others, that doesn't seem like they're really that into it. So talk to me about kind of that juxtaposition, because I love that, especially like you would think maybe the Cylons would have been the polytheistic ones, and the humans would have been. So I love all of that, but that kind of juxtaposition of everything. So what do you think about the spirituality of the humans?
Yeah, it was unexpected. You don't think you're going to get that from an advanced race of humans, right? You don't think you're going to get that in a sci-fi vehicle. You don't think you're going to get that from the good guys necessarily. I love the blending of those two things. It's really cool. I mean, the only thing I could think of that's an approximation of that, again, is something like Stargate, where it kind of integrates the cosmic with the ancient Egyptian or something, but this was really different when they start talking about, my ears were really pricked. Oh. When they start talking about Aphrodite and Artemis and Athena and all that kind of stuff. It was like, whoa, this is really their thing, and going after that relic. What was it? The arrow
of Apollo, or the arrow of something.
Whatever it was, like it was that's when it became like real. Like, oh, this is really what they feel. And like, I like you calling that character the mystic. I was saying, like, is she a seer? Is she a high priestess? Whatever. I like the mystic thing. But you see that they have, it almost sort of combines the tech, the highly advanced side, with a religion that seems to us as modern day actual humans primitive, or fictional, or more like they're sort of dedicated to a legend or a myth rather than a religion. So that was really interesting. It's really colorful. I think it's super fun. And again, it's like one of those things. It's like just thinking outside the box for a sci-fi story. It's really a lot of fun, where you kind of get the opposite of what you would expect between the antagonist and the protagonist, and what they worship and their values and all that kind of stuff.
Let's get into some of these characters.
Oh,
we have to talk about some of the characters. I mean, we have to start, of course, with William Adama, I think. Edward James Olmos. I mean, this performance is awesome. I think he's just fantastic. And perfect casting for this character. And obviously you love him and know him as Castillo from Miami Vice, but
so good,
where he became famous, really. But I just think that he plays Adama. When Adama is shot at the end of the first season, and you just see the way everyone reacts, and Dee's like holding his hand, and it's just like real. You can tell that he's a very fatherly figure. You have a lot of questions about how long they've all been together. It seems like they were all about to go their separate ways and decommission the ship, and maybe some retire and some go to other ships and whatever. So he's really the glue, and you want to root for him, and you do root for him. You know who he reminds me of, Dagan, in some way, and I don't know if this was intentional, but he reminds me a little bit of George Washington. Just in the sense of, like, there's a man who everyone is looking to protect them, and no matter how much they try to give him, he could become a complete autocrat in 2 seconds. They have all of the guns, and his instinct is not to become a fascist. In fact, in some ways, Roslin is more of a fascist than Adama is, which is shocking, although I don't think either of them are, but the pull towards fascism in this environment is inextricable. And I actually think 99 out of 100 times something like this would happen, the military would immediately take this over and there would be a fascist dictatorship. Not that that would be good or bad in this situation. It just is the way it happens. So what I love about Adama is this almost George Washington-esque like insistence that he does not become empowered, that there is some sort of election, that he doesn't really want to do this stuff. Now, he does show up. I mean, George Washington showed up and crossed the Delaware and killed him some Hessians with his own hands.
Right.
It's not like he just you have to go back and plan. George Washington did ride at the lead of the column to go suppress the Whiskey Rebellion while he was president. So you have to come out and fight once in a while. But I love this almost Washington-esque staid-like honorable character that everyone loves and respects, and that he demands, no matter what he does, even with Roslyn and their kind of conflict, they clearly love and respect each other, or respect each other. And so let's start there with that Edward James Olmos, who's obviously one of the most beloved characters in the show.
Oh, dude. Talk about typecasting. You couldn't even imagine another actor you'd do it being as successful in this role. Life of the party, wild and crazy guy. Dude, can I just say, I know I talk about Miami Vice every time we talk about Almost on the show, but there's a compilation on YouTube for those, especially for those of you who haven't seen Miami Vice. Somebody put a Lieutenant Castillo sort of compilation together. There's no character in fiction that should be that sad. He is the most morose dude in the whole, that character. It's so good. And I think it ends with a clip I don't even remember, where he's like fighting these Russian gangsters with a samurai sword. Like protecting this family, and it's like all Miami-esque setting, like these beautiful palm trees, it's daytime, the sun's shining, and here's Castillo with this samurai sword. Like, it's so good. But I mean, almost has that sort of gravity. He's also, I think he's grave. I mean, he has that sort of, like you said, he's the father, the ultimate father figure. the taskmaster, tough love. We know, although he's there front and center, he's a living legend already. You know, they call him the old man. Everybody kind of hitches their wagon to him. They really rely on him. And, you know, although he is tough, you know, he's the tough love, unapologetic leader. He's going to do whatever he thinks he has to do. There is that element, that George Washington-esque element of, like, not afraid to get your hands dirty. He's going to call the shots, right or wrong. He's going to be responsible. He's going to make the decisions. He's going to make all the tough calls. But it is interesting how much, and sort of touching and moving, how much everybody on that bridge, everybody on that crew, everybody on that ship loves him. You know, they really, really love and respect him like a proper father. And, you know, he just has that whole thing, like he's a man of few words. But every time he does open his mouth, it's of utmost importance, and everybody's hanging on every syllable. You know, that type of leader. Like, even when somebody doesn't get along with him, you know, like, you know, the relationship with him and Rosalind, or even with, you know, the XO with the Colonel, like, you know, you see the respect, even when they disagree, even when they come to loggerheads. Like, you see how much they love and admire this man. And he's just, you know, he's the kingpin. He's the linchpin. He's the keystone in this whole thing. And yeah, man, I was shocked. I think that was a, you know, yell out loud moment for me when he was shot at the end of episode 13. I was like, what? You know, like, what? I was not, and shot twice.
Yeah.
And laying on the table, and, you know, he's bleeding out, and everybody's kind of, Dee's cradling him, and Lee's there, you know, Apollo's there. And,
yeah, Lee's handcuffed.
Right, that's right. He's getting ready to, and
yeah.
The president's in the, you know, she's in the brig. So, yeah, dude, it's like, they couldn't have ended on a more compelling note. I mean, I can't wait to start season 2. I mean, I can't.
Yeah, I went right in. You know, I went right in and started watching.
Did you?
Season 2 yesterday? Yeah, because I'm trying not to get too ahead of myself. I think we'll do it in a few weeks, so I'm trying to pace myself, because I really like watching things right up to the butt, so that when we start recording, it's like fresh in my mind. I really like doing that. I think it's better for the show. So I'm trying to slow down in that regard. But all right, so we have Adama, of course, and you had brought up his son Lee, played by Jamie Bamber. This is another notable and important character in the show, and I love the turn that we see in Lee. Obviously, Lee is an asshole and blames his father for something that is, we find out, really, if anyone's fault, Starbucks, and in the death of Zach, his brother. So he really has a chip on his shoulder with his father, yet it's so serendipitous that he ends up on the Galactica to ride the old Raider Mark II that his dad flew in the Cylon War, and thus they are together when the world ends. So what do you make of this particular character, Lee? Call sign Apollo. I
wrote down that I'm still trying to figure out this character, because initially, as you said, he's a complete asshole. He's completely unlikable. And that was a weird look for me, because you always want to love the ace pilot, especially of the protagonist, right? You want to, I mean, let alone the Red Baron type. You want to love the ace pilot. You want to love the Luke Skywalker, or the initial Apollo or Starbuck from the 1978 series and stuff. You want to just, and you couldn't, you know, he's sort of, you know, has this reverse magnetism thing going on. Handsome as the day is long.
Yeah, definitely.
But what I really loved out of the character, you do see a turn. You know, he feels like, you know what it reminded me of? This is weird, but follow me. He reminded me of the kid that you know in school who's in math class with you, but their parent is the math teacher. It's like, in a way, it's like lucky, you know, but then you're like, then when you really stop to think about it, you're like, no, that's like a lot of added responsibility, you know, to have your parent as a teacher, and it's kind of the awkwardness maybe, or, you know, having to really rise to the occasion because you do have that same last name. It kind of reminded me of that dynamic. So it elicits a little bit of sympathy from me. But what I love between him, and we haven't talked about her yet, but what I love about, you know, between Apollo and Starbuck is they're both sort of the ace pilots, but they have very different disciplines, where it's known that Apollo is sort of very by the book, controlled, type A, talented, but he's not going to think outside the box But you have Starbuck, who is, the talented pilot that's improvisational. There's just a lot of natural ability there. She's wild. And I love the fact that they kind of butt heads over their different approaches to piloting, because I'm all in for the Colonial Viper and the pilots and that.
Yeah, I know how you texted me about that actually, and
super fun.
Great, we got to get you a model or something.
Oh, I still love now there. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in this series they pay homage to the original series and say, like, they show Commander Adama, his Viper Mark II, which is like the Viper from the original series. Now I think they pilot the Mark III in this series, which are different. It's more slick, it's more polished, more rounded. But yeah, dude, I'm all aboard for that. But I'm interested in Apollo going into season 2, because that you do see a turn with this character now. Not only that, but the sort of space opera like love triangle between him and his relationship with Starbuck, and the fact that Starbuck was attached to his brother Zach before he passed away, and the whole backstory with that. And then, Starbuck gets involved with Dr. Gaius in a one-night stand. So you have all those sort of romantic elements that you're seeing that you can't wait for them to resolve themselves too, because you start to care about these characters. So you want to see how all that stuff's going to play out.
Certainly. And speaking of Starbuck, Simon Pusateri wrote into us on Patreon, just like you can if you support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, early ad-free access, write in, vote on topics, etc. He says, one of the ways that I have felt that Battlestar was way ahead of its time was its varied and detailed portrayal of strong female characters throughout the fleet. Obviously, Kara Starbuck, Thrace, and Laura Roslin come to mind first, but there are tons of others as well. Callie comes to mind for me. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the way gender roles are shown in the series, specifically with the military structure? So this is one of the things that I really like about this, and it is ahead of its time, and they never note it, although from the very beginning, it's shown. I actually think a really important scene, an understated scene, is when Billy walks into... He's lost on Galactica, and he walks into the bathroom, and Dee's in there, and it's just men and women, and she's like, get her in or get out. And you see at that moment that, like, there is no delineation between gender in this world. It's not just in the military. They call Rosalind sir. They never call her ma'am. And I dig that there's just, like, it's just kind of so advanced that, yeah, the guys and the girls shower together. Yeah, there's probably some sexual shit going on between them. Yeah, they play poker together. Yeah, it's a ship, and it's co-ed and all of that. And I dig that. I think it's very cool. So what do you think of kind of the heightened female character? But we can roll that into Starbuck. I mean, Starbuck's a great, iconic character from this show, played very ably, of course, by Katie Sackhoff. And the more I watch Battlestar, the more I liked this character, Starbuck. She's a little bit annoying. I also think Katie Sackhoff's an overactor in some ways, but yeah, like her fake laugh and all that, but she tones that down, and she becomes a really important linchpin to the operation, and you root for her. And like you said, she is the ace pilot. She does these crazy fucking maneuvers and goes into 8 raiders and fights them at once. Hot Dog kind of comes and tries to help her, and she crashes down onto a moon, and she's rescued. And it's just and she engineers, figures out how to fly a raider, which is one of my very favorite scenes in the first or one of my very favorite arcs in the entire first season, is good. Them figuring out that the Raiders are alive, which is so fucking creepy. And also they go way further into that later. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about Kara and what you think about her Katie Sackhoff's performance and Starbuck as a character and all that.
I was delighted by this character. I don't know Katie Sackhoff from anything else, and I really think she delivered like a very quirky, very unique performance. At first, it's a little off-putting because you've never seen anything quite like it. But you could really see Sackhoff as having fun with the character. And it just works in favor of what we know about the character. She's the ace pilot, but she's not, that pure of heart ace pilot like your Luke or your Wedge. Like she has faults. Like she could be a little unlikable. She could brag a little too much. She has that swagger. She has that bravado. And it's not in a Han Solo-esque likable way. It's like a little bit off-putting. It's like, all right, she talks about how good she is.
Right.
It makes her very believable, makes her very human. And I think she's just a lot of fun to watch. You could tell this actress is having a lot of fun in the part. And, just really, and I've seen her in interviews. I've seen her do panels at cons and stuff. And she really, she was on board for this. Like, she really took the role seriously. Again, like, just like we'll talk about with Mary McDonnell, with her Madam President character, like they just got it. They just got that very human grounding element. They didn't think of it like sci-fi. They thought of it like a proper human drama, and they delivered their performances that way. And it's just super, super, super fun. I heard too many things about the Starbuck character and what ended up happening. That was just through watching panels and stuff. Unfortunately, I got a couple of things spoiled for me. One thing I was surprised about that I could tell you, I love that they make Starbuck a female character. I think that's really cool.
Yep, which is the difference from the
right,
original.
Because that's he plays Face in the A-Team that played Starbuck in the original 1978 version. What the heck is that actor's name? He's amazing, very charismatic,
original Starbuck,
handsome.
Oh my god, I'll look it up. Just go.
It's slipping me. But what I was surprised about, Kyle, when I really started thinking about it, I'm surprised that they used the name Starbuck. Because of the connotation now. I can't think of Starbuck without thinking about Starbucks. No, I just can't.
Yeah,
it's impossible.
It is interesting that they...
Yeah. And, Starbucks was almost around. I think Starbucks made its debut in 1971. Now, it wasn't... In the 1970s, it wasn't what it was today. But it was around for almost 10 years when the first, iteration of the show came out. So, but I was surprised at that because it just has... who could think of I can't personally not think of Starbucks. When you could have called her anything. So I was surprised about that. But besides that, yeah, love the character. Really, really one of my favorites. And she does cross over into melodrama. But I think maybe Sackhoff gets a little lucky because it just works with the character. She has that kind of swagger, even when she's injured, even when she has the broken leg. She's not afraid to tell you how good she is. It just kind of puts a little bit of gray into the heroic characters and makes them feel a little more human, a little more relatable.
Yeah, it's oh wait, I was gonna look this up for you. Colonel Ty Baltar. Where is this? Why is it so hard to find? Oh, Richard. Wait a minute, Richard Hatch.
No, he played Apollo in the original. And
then he plays Tom. I don't think I even knew that he plays the terrorist in this one.
Yeah, so good. He hasn't aged.
Zarek.
Yeah, let me look it up.
Yeah, look it up real quick. Why can't I find it? Lieutenant Dirk Benedict?
Dirk Benedict. That's him.
I don't know why it's so hard to find like a cogent fucking roster.
He's great. Weird. He felt like such a great approximation to Han Solo in the 1970s. He had the low slung sidearm and he was kind of like, he had the boots and he just felt like Han Solo. I loved him. But, this is a proper reimagining of the character. I love her. I
had no idea Richard Hatch was in the original. That's awesome. That was totally lost on me.
Great actor.
Well, we were speaking of these powerful female characters, and of course you brought up Mary McDonnell, Laura Roslin, education secretary who becomes president. I dig this character too. I love the arc for her early on. She becomes a pretty devout religious believer based on all the things that are happening, and shows a little bit of it's a little braggadocious in some way because for her to believe what is happening, it means that she has to be the chosen one to bring them. And she starts seeing visions and she starts taking the Kamala extract because she has cancer, and she starts having these visions of snakes, 10 and 2 or whatever. And then it all ends up that she ends up convincing Starbuck to go and steal the Raider that they reverse engineered, go back to Caprica to get the arrow, lands her in the brig. This is what I was saying, where I feel like in some way she has a more fascist outlook at this point than Adama.
I could see that.
Or at least a totalitarian one. In her case, it's more of like a theocratic totalitarian dictatorship where it's all based on this religious aspect, although she's been kind of inherently undercut because Adama says that he knows how to get to Earth. This is part of their religion, and so it's going to be a little hard for her to kind of circle the square there. But what do you think about Laura Roslin character and how she's kind of caught in this unusual situation? I love it personally. I think it's awesome that
she's so good.
She just happens to be there, basically.
Yeah, what a great character. Really, maybe even more so than Almost, like really a grounding agent for me. She plays the part, Mary McDonnell. She plays the part like she could be playing in The West Wing or something, or some Tom Clancy film where she just feels like a politician. She feels very grounded, very authentic. She all those things that a politician has, right? She has charisma. She's diplomatic. She could be pragmatic, all the matics, And, that relationship with Adama where it's like the politician versus the politics versus the military, and how, they have a mutual respect, but there's a little antagonistic thing going on there. There's a little bit of an adversarial relationship, despite the respect and growing love. And, for some reason, from the beginning, I just want to see these two characters get along because they're both very smart and they both have a lot of conviction. She'll go against the grain if she needs to, and that makes her a little bit dangerous to Adama in a way, because we see her in a couple of different instances in that first season sort of do what she thinks is inherently right, despite, what the fallout's going to be. So you have to respect that conviction, but also that whole thing about her having the terminal breast cancer. There's an upside down hourglass on this character from almost the moment you meet her. Very early on, she's going to die.
Yeah, it's a cool scene too in the miniseries where she's in the doctor's office.
Oh, I love it.
And the ships are like taking off or whatever, so you can't hear what they're saying, but she's getting bad news. Very cool.
It's so good.
Yeah, I'm stoked that Mary McDonnell brought her acting chops to this, because I think that she's
great.
She's awesome, and she's a little melodramatic at times too. I think one of the funny things about this character is not who plays it, but just the nature of the character. I think there is some weirdness in this show from that respect, where it's like, the press and like all, it's like, I don't know that if there's 50,000 of you left that this is really the way it would be going, but it's fun to play into that. I thought the
same thing.
Yeah.
I thought the exact same thing with things like the press, because you're always counting. You're like, all right, there's 48,000 people left. How many, I know they use the press junkets as exposition, and I think it's actually pretty clever. I realized that eventually, like episode 6 or something. I was like, oh, this is exposition. This is why they're doing. It's a model for explaining things, which works. In a show this complicated, you have to have that sometimes. But yeah, you think like, okay, like there's this many soldiers, there's the press junket, like there's the, they do there's people that do a talk show. We find out a little later on in the season.
Yeah, which is like kind of funny. It's like, it's supposed to be, I found that funny because it's supposed to be like kind of a Sunday show. They call it like the because there's a show called the Capitol Beat, and I think they call it like the Colony Beat or something.
Yeah,
like that. So
something kind of like Colonial, whatever it is.
Yeah, Colonial Beat. Yeah. Yeah, something like that, which was really funny. And it is interesting to think like everyone who is, because they go into it a little bit actually when they introduce that fake show, where it's like these are kind of just the people that were in space, like that. Yeah. Just they were on Galactica to cover this event or whatever, the museum opening, and so it is kind of cool from that respect where it's like, but they go into that. Zarek actually goes into it a lot, and we'll talk about him in a little while, but where he's like, everyone's kind of just working. Like no one, why is this gardener working? Why are all these things happening? And it's cool because they touch on it a little bit where they talk about how there are wireless shows and all of this. And I would prefer that it was more done like that, where it was kind of a renegade or guerrilla op, where there wasn't a lot of news coming out and it was like people trying to get into telling. So I appreciate where it's going, but I think it's kind of funny to say it is grounded sci-fi. So you can say these things in some way. I don't think it would go quite like this. I think that it would be much more controlled and constrained. But I love that.
I hear you on that.
In keeping it a little looser and more societal, they allow you to explore a lot of these interesting themes.
Sure.
Which is fun. What about the before we get into number 6? Well, actually, you know what? Let's talk about number 6 before we even get into the other models.
Oh, man.
So number 6 is the main Cylon that you meet. And you see multiple versions of her. Tricia Helfer, of course, plays her sex icon from this role. Although Dagan and I texted Dagan where I'm like, I don't know how it came up, but I'm like, I've never been really attracted to this character. Like on a physical level, like I don't personally. She's obviously literally sexy by the definition of it, of course. But I'm not really drawn to her at all. As like, wow, like she's like I love Alison Brie or something.
Right.
It's so interesting. I was always kind of fascinated by that because by not being swept up into that like some probably 20-year-old boys would be or men would be, you get to really realize that she's an amazing character. In fact, you don't really even know who she is at this point. You don't actually know if Gaius. They really do suggest at this point that she is somehow tethered to God. That version of number 6 is somehow endowed with some sort of knowledge, but we know that there are other number 6s as well, and you've not seen them resurrect, so you assume that this one that's with Gaius is just the one that's been with him in his mind. So what do you make of all of her performances so far?
Yeah, it's such a strange model because you're really trying to figure out, especially in the beginning, like, is this some kind of Cylon alien power that they could just pop up in your mind or your subconscious? Is it a projection? Is it a hallucination? Is it a hallucination on part of the Cylons? Do they have this power over people? It's like, is it some sort of robotic technology that they developed? Is it an angel? We don't know at first. And first of all, Tricia Helfer, just in watching the panels and watching the cons and watching her talk about it, knowing that she didn't have any previous real acting experience, she's a great actress. She has a natural ability. And, she was obviously a model. She was a pretty big model. She has that, obviously, the body and the physique. She's tall. She's beautiful. So she brings that. And I think it would be interesting. No perv here, but Alison Brie in the part, I'm on board for that.
Oh, yeah. No,
because you want to see the girl next door be like the seductress. This Tricia Helfer looks like a proper seductress. You know what I mean? She looks like the femme fatale, like a Jessica Rabbit type or something.
Right.
So she works for the part. And it's interesting, too, like, you pay attention to her wardrobe throughout, and you're like, she's always dressed for, like, a really nice dinner in the Caribbean. Like somewhere warm, like a 4 or 5 star restaurant when you're down in down in St. Thomas or something. So it's interesting, too, that they have that. They definitely have that thing where it's like, she's supposed to be working on the audience too. And I get that. But really for me more, she works as an actress. I have to say, and I don't know why, but she didn't annoy me because I like her performance a lot. But the model of having her come in and sort of invade the scene and sort of start talking to guys annoyed me after a while. I don't know what it was. I don't know. Maybe I'll be able to articulate that better after like another season. But I felt like it kind of interrupted things, and maybe it was because they weren't really explaining it yet. Maybe I was getting frustrated because I was like trying to figure out exactly how this was happening. Eventually, you could kind of by the end of the season, you could put 2 and 2 together a little bit. But yeah, I found that. Did you have the same thing, Kyle, where you kind of found that off-putting, where she would just come in?
It's a little frustrating just because there are really clever scenes like in writing where there's an awesome scene where he's with Billy and where Gaius is with Billy and Rosalind, and he's talking to both Six and Rosalind by answering the questions that they're asking him independently with the same answer. And I think it's super cool, like great writing, where he's able to like get Six off of his back while at the same time giving Rosalind answers and not coming off as crazy. But
yeah, he figures it out.
I think the one thing that's weird, because they do touch on it, where it's like Gaius Baltar is a quirky genius. He's won basically 3 equivalents of what I guess would be like a Nobel Prize in their world. And
good point.
He has unfettered access to like the defense mainframe and is responsible in some way for what happened. But I do find it frustrating in some way just because it allows us to not see Gaius and Six on their own as much as maybe we could. We do see them alone a lot. But maybe there's more that can be explored there, and then allows you to more neatly tie up these threads with Baltar in real life or in the real world for them, because it probably after a while, like there's a scene where Baltar is basically like beating off and is walked in on, right? And it's like after a while you would think that this would puzzle some people. Be like, what the fuck's going on with this guy? Like this guy, like there's they've been together for like 50 days or so by the end of the season. So at this point you would think this guy's something's wrong with this dude.
Yes.
So that from that perspective, it's a little bit interesting, but I do love with Six, just the you kind of get little different pieces of her. And obviously the model has a certain tendency, but each individual you meet is different. So I do love how you see like a really violent version of Six on fighting Starbuck in the museum. And you see a very staid and brave Six when the nukes start going off and she protects Gaius from the blast. She knows she's going to get resurrected, but the entire idea of getting kind of different pieces of that character is pretty cool too. Plus you see her, the model in the real world, she infiltrates the ship. She's an associate of with the digital image of some doctor that died on the original ship that was left behind when it was infiltrated during the first episode of the show. So we see her in the real world too. I love that scene as well when he basically walks in and pretends like she's not even there because he thinks the model is just in his head. So there are some kind of cool ways that they can work around it. But I agree with you. It is a little redundant, and I think it happens less
as it goes on.
Forward.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Since we're talking about the Cylons, we should talk about some of the other models. We see 3 of them so far in the show. I think there's only 3 that you see so far. So Leobin, number 2, Doral, number 5, and Sharon is number 8. And then, of course, we see number 6. So Sharon is the one we get to know the best, played by Grace Park. That's Boomer, Valeri. But we also see Doral, who kind of plays the role of like the PR guy in the beginning, and Leobin is they find him at the anchorage when they're trying to get ammo, and he's being affected by the electrical storm that surrounds it. How do you feel about those characters and kind of the way you're starting to understand the different tenors of the models themselves? Because we call number 2 Leobin. They don't call him that.
Right.
We call number 5 Doral, but they don't call him that either. And we see them on the anchorage, especially we see them all together with multiple models. So we get a little bit of idea of how they're working, and we don't know them all yet. We're going to meet more. But I'm wondering what you think about kind of the surrounding humanoid Cylons so far.
I love this humanoid Cylon agent thing. And I love the fact that they know that they're seemingly immortal, like that their consciousness is just going to be swept into a new body if they're threatened or if they're, quote unquote, destroyed or attempted to be destroyed in any way. Doral is the one who blows up part of the ship with the C4 in the suitcase, right? He's that character.
Yeah.
Okay. So and it's interesting because he same thing with, what's his name? Leobin or number 2?
Yeah, number 2. Yeah.
The same thing that, they sort of have that insidious look. They have that sort of, conviction. We get a little more out of the number 2 character and his ideals and the fact that he's playing with them emotionally, and he's basically lying to them, and he's deceiving them. He's telling them that the Dharma is a Cylon and everything. Everything you think that they would get up to, given this power to blend in or to sabotage the humans, they do already in the first season. So it makes a lot of sense. It's very clever on their part to use the tools they have to try to, get under the human skin or try to get the better of mankind. Super cool. And then the Boomer character, they really do dwell on her probably especially through the second half of the first season, where you get, she's the one you really get to follow, and you get to sort of be with her as she goes through the emotions of knowing she's knowing she's a Cylon, knowing she's a duplicate. She has a relationship with the Helo character that she sort of laments because when he finds out she's a boomer, when she finds out she's a Cylon, then he sort of rejects her. So you're going through all the emotional throes, and you're seeing that there's a lot more to these Cylons than just this group of robotic terrorists. That they have all these emotions. They feel sadness for their unrequited love. They feel rejection. They feel anger. We see 6 get extremely, jealous. One of her iterations gets extremely jealous. Shows a lot of like human type of jealousy. So it's really interesting because you realize that you're fighting a humanistic foe, but highly advanced. So, they're getting the people that you're rooting for are getting a full dose of like a really powerful enemy, in these Cylons and what they're capable of.
Definitely. And I find there's a few really interesting scenes with Leobin too. He could have killed Starbuck and doesn't. Also
shows a lot of restraint.
It shows a lot with Roslyn having the insight to know that Leobin is lying about a lot. She says something along the lines of like he mixes truth with lies.
Right.
So it makes it very like that model is like kind of like their propagandist in some way. And it's fun because when you start to think about, because the question immediately comes like, why are the Cylons making the same version? Why don't they make a bunch of humans? And you realize that they're doing what they know how. The limitations of their own mind and their own way to think. They think in complete absolutes. Think about it. Like, they come and destroy humanity. They're not interested in any surrender. They come with a mission, and they go away patiently like computers would for decades, and then come back and just destroy everyone.
Great point.
And it's 0 and 1, right? Yes or no. And you realize that they made humans like they made the Centurions on a fucking manufacturing line. They don't, for some reason, it's unknown if they really have thought about it. Like, we could have made thousands of these models, and obviously it takes some sort of resources. One of the things I really like is when they go on the gas run or the Tilium run, and you realize that the Cylons need this technology. They're building things like they need the ore, so they're working within a certain rule set that they can't even out sophisticate, and that is cool. But I'm curious, what do you think happens with what are your thoughts on what happens when they get resurrected? Have you thought about that?
It's a great point. It's a really great point, because you wonder about, because we know they have so many human traits, like, what's the emotional toll of that? What is, how attached are they getting to their previous self or their previous body, and how it changes with the nuance that may change with every iteration and all that. It's such a great point. First of all, I love the point of that. We know the Cylons are a very powerful enemy, but they are operating in some sort of parameters. It's not just magic. They have fuel. There's constraints. So that's a great point. But also, I love the constraints of their technology. There's the fact, I don't know if we find this out in season 1 or if I heard this, but that the fact that there are only 12 iterations.
There are 12. Right? Yeah, that's not, you're not supposed to know that yet, but yeah, I think that's in the second. Yeah, there are 12 models.
That's in the second season, right? So there are some sort of limits to what they're capable of. Because, like you're saying, if they could just, create random looking Cylons and embed them in the fleet, in the colonial fleet, then it would do a lot more damage than just these 12 that they're repeating over and over again. But yeah, man, it's a great point, because it gives you a sort of sympathy for the antagonist, because besides their conviction, besides that what they are doing, they seem to believe that they're serving a god. It seems to be that getting rid of the humans is part of this plan that they think is the right thing to do. Maybe a lot of that too is kind of washed up with the fact that they do their consciousness, that whole thing of sweeping the consciousness from one form to the other, one physical outlet to the other, that comes with some sort of toll too, but they have a conviction in it, even though it doesn't feel right.
I love that you say that. You're going to really love some of the stuff that's coming up, because there is a huge question about, like, they die, and the idea really, and you can kind of see it, they talk about it a little bit in this season, is just that, like, they're learning every time they die about, like, they can relay things back. Like, dying makes all the sense in the world for them. And
it's cool.
So they can, and so they get much more into how that all works. And one of the things it's a kind of foreshadowing is, and I find it fascinating, it's another one of those things they just gloss over, is that when Adama and Leoben, number 2, are in the anchorage getting ammo, Leoben talks about how he will get resurrected, and Adama says, like, if that was true, you would have killed yourself and resurrected already. I don't think your signal can get out of here, and because of all the electronic noise, and that's another thing they're going to deal with, and the real fear that places in the Cylons, which is awesome. And so I love that they start laying the foundation for a lot of these more philosophical and scientific questions about the way they operate.
Super cool.
There is so much more to the Cylons. I can't wait for you to, because I just know you, about how much you're going to love it. But let's talk a little bit about the more old school Cylons.
Sure.
So one of the cool things we see in the miniseries, which I'm sure you picked up on, is you see the original Centurions in the museum, which is fucking dope from the original series. So when the Centurions come back out, you realize that they're a different model. So when that guy is on the station, he's seeing not only number 6, who he thinks is human. I mean, imagine how confused that guy is. We don't ever hear from him again. He's dead.
Oh my God.
On the space station. A beautiful woman walks in. The last time they saw the Cylons, they were all metallic, bright silver. And these 2 Centurions walk in too, which he has never seen these models. In fact, the paperwork he has on his desk, you can see it if you watch. there's like the information on the models and all this kind of stuff. And so that guy's awesome just because like he's like, holy shit, you know what? And that it's over in 30 seconds like that. But what do you think of the Raiders? What do you think of the base stars and kind of the different iterations of the Centurions and stuff that we see? How do you feel you're a designer, so how do you feel like they do it with this stuff?
Oh, it's so cool. I mean, I love the originals. I love the original Cylon Centurions. I love the original Cylon Raiders. But, you know, you could see it's a proper evolution in design. You know, the Cylon Raider, the original Cylon Centurion, rather, looked a lot like a stormtrooper, but they did all the right things. They did the red eye, the sweeping red eye. They made it like a stainless instead of white. Like, they did all the cool things, but you knew that they were the troopers of the bad guys. And then the original Raider was very UFO-like. You know, kind of primitive B-movie sci-fi in a way, but kind of cool. Like, it had wings that could sweep out. It had a cockpit that looked very similar to, like, the rear window of a 1980s Trans Am. It had those panels that were sort of ribbed. But, it was kind of cool. But you could see they just kind of stepped it up for the early to mid-2000s. They made the Cylon Raider, for instance, looks very, like, almost reminds me of Tim Burton-esque Batman, you know, the Batwing, you know, almost feels like that, where it feels a little more aggressive. And the Centurions feel a lot more aggressive. They feel like almost like insect-like, but they take a lot of those cues. They still have the stainless. They still have the red eye that's very menacing. You know, and you can't, the humming. You got to have the telltale humming.
Yeah, awesome.
But you can't judge it too much. Like, the designs are cool, but, you know, the animation is 15 to 20 years old now. So the VFX, it looks kind of cheesy, like the opening shot of the Cylons where it says, you know, the Cylons were created by man, and you see them walking. Like, you have to realize, we talk about this all the time in the show, like, technology has evolved a lot in 20 years, so you can't judge it on that basis. Everything looks really cool. I love the base stars because they're kind of formless. They almost look like modern art in a way.
You would imagine that they're like, the shape of them is like some computerized, like, perfect version of what, like, their computer software was like, this is the perfect size and shape of.
That's a great point.
You know what I mean? Like, that's how I've always thought about
Complete
it.
efficiency.
Right, exactly.
In design.
This is the way it works. Yeah, like, that's how I always looked at it.
That's so cool. And I love what we find out later on, that there's sort of some biomechanical thing going on with the Raiders, because you see, it's like, at first when I was seeing the Cylon Raider, I was like, it looks like they have a Cylon head. It's kind of cheesy, like a giant Cylon head in the front. But then then when you realize they incorporate all this Geiger-esque, you know, the tubes and the slime and the viscera, you know, they're alive in there. Mm-hmm. You know, they have organs and bones and blood and all that.
Brain, she pulls the brain out. Remember, she pulls the brain out of it. Yeah, it's
so unexpected. I was not expecting. You see the blood coming out of the. You know, you see the blood dripping down. It's like,
it's awesome because there's a bullet hole in the side of the Raider's head, but there's blood pouring out of it, and it's very unsettling. And also, the Centurions aren't built like that. So you realize that the Centurions are mechanical. Like, they still are. So the Raider in some way is something else. Like, and by the way, when they go into the base star, when Racetrack and Boomer go to the base star, that's also biomechanical. You know, you don't see it very much, but like when she's walking around,
you see some.
Yeah, you see. Now we'll see much more of the base stars later, but so it starts to plant it plants the seed that their ships are alive.
I friggin' love that so much.
And it's horrifying. And I can't wait for you to get more.
It's so cool. You know what? Because the first Battlestar, if I'm not mistaken, the Centurions piloted the Raiders.
Right. Yeah, they
just
did.
Like the good guys did.
Because they do say, someone says at some point, like, there are no pilots. Like, remember when the Raider, like the new Raiders go out, which is awesome, and they get all disabled, and they're like, there are no pilots, and they like radio that back or whatever.
Oh, it's so neat.
Little cool pieces of exposition like
good
that.
Shit, man. And taking a page out of anime. I mean, that's what Macross did with the bad guy. You know, the bad guys in Macross were, you know, Macross, the good guys piloted these giant transformable mechs that went from jet to robot, and they sat in the chest. The bad guys were just wearing body armor. They were the size of the good guys' mechs, but they were just in armor.
Right.
And they were, you know, so it's like you're taking cues from different, more contemporary things. At least, unless it's a coincidence. But I like to think
I think there's a lot of that drawn intentionally from that. And I love the idea that we're starting to get some sort of hierarchy to the Cylons. It exists, and we're starting to understand. I remember watching this and having a lot of questions, like,
where's the Cylon home planet? What are they doing? And what is the plan? And all. There are so many things that can be asked. So some of those things will be answered, some of them won't, and we'll see how that all works out. I'm so excited for you to learn more, because I know the Cylons are the most intriguing part of the show. They know that. They do Moore and all those guys know that. They do a really nice job of never showing you too much of them, and keeping you kind of going on that, which I really appreciate.
That's cool.
And just getting inside the base star, even flying into the base star and getting close to the base star, you're seeing pieces of it that you've never seen before. You can see, like, it's cool if people just stop and look at things, which I love doing. I love doing that. I do that a lot in, like, Handmaid's Tale, especially because there's always, like, maps and shit in the background. And
I got to start that show.
Oh, that show's so good.
Really do.
So we talked a little bit about the Cylons. We talked about their technology. We've talked a lot about the humans. I want to talk a little bit about what I was talking about before with the allegorical stuff based on when the show was written and created.
Sure.
Pete Schwartzstein wrote into us and said, how well do you think the miniseries in season 1 work as an allegory for 9/11 and the subsequent war on terror? Battlestar Galactica could have been a rather simplistic good versus evil story, but Ronald Moore took a much more layered approach to this subject matter. What are your thoughts on the show's historical connections and its treatment of subjects like PTSD, sleeper cells, dehumanization, war? I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think it's so obvious that it was written after 9/11 that it sometimes becomes a little heavy-handed in a lot of ways, but that's such a relativistic way of looking at it that I think that most people that come to this now might not even notice any of that. I mean, because I think a lot of that was just on our mind in 2003, 2004.
Sure, of course.
I mean, they fucking straight up water torture someone, one of the Cylons in this. Like,
yes.
That's a lot of it is like ripped right out of the headlines in some way. And so I'm wondering if that kind of shone through to you as well, because I actually think, and I it's hard to put this into words, I think people know what I'm saying, is that I think one of the ways that they play around with 9/11 as well is that 9/11 is good versus evil, no doubt. But there were people back in the day that sound much more reasonable now than they did then, and they should be given a lot of credit. People like Howard Zinn, specifically Noam Chomsky and others, who were saying, like, you know what, like, we kind of fucked around and found out in some way what was going to happen. And doesn't mean you deserve it. Doesn't mean you want people to die, but you meddle enough and horrible things are going to happen. And you kind of see that here in some way with the way the story is structured. Like and I wanted to ask you this at the end, but I'll ask you this now. Like, and I kept asking Micah, I'm like, do you have any sympathy for the Cylons at all? Because, like, I don't know that it's as hard good versus evil as it is. Like, they were enslaved and they were created out of nothing, enslaved and removed all of their agency. It's not quite 1-to-1, but it reminds me a lot of those very difficult, like, Air America style 2002, 2003 conversations where it's like, yeah, like, it sucks what happened on 9/11, but you also, like, overthrew their government and did all this shit, and there's some sympathetic element to it. And I'm wondering what you make of that, because I think that's a really hard thing, that's a hard rope to walk now, and that's a really hard rope to walk then. So I don't know if any of that's shown through to you, but I'm curious what you think about the kind of allegorical nature of the war on terror and all that, because that's a very commonly talked about thing with this show. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And you could see it. You could see all those themes. I mean, fighting an enemy that's embedding themselves with you unseen. The nature of a new, a quote unquote new type of war where you're not fighting an army in a battlefield or on an ocean or in the sky. You're fighting them on your own turf. You're trying to figure out, how do we fight this enemy? Sort of trying to balance restraint and understanding versus action, capitalizing on anger. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, you got to understand, the colonials, right? I mean, down to 50,000 people that were basically this little civilian fleet, like you said, that was basically probably airborne at the time. They were away from the actual body of the colonies. So how many thousands, millions of families died? These people plucked away. There's nothing left. So they call it a
holocaust.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And acting on that anger versus, trying to let cooler heads prevail, and how realistic is that in the moment? So many really interesting things, and I don't know how much sympathy I have for the Cylons, at least by the end of the first season, because, you know, the only thing I could think of, if they're really tied to this religious outlook, this mantra, credo, whatever you want to call it, their spirituality, if that they're really being told vis-a-vis their religion to slaughter mankind. And, you know, that's, even then, it's like, it's still murder. That's not a typical thing for, you know, a proper religion to sort of preach. And, you know, it makes me think back, I love thinking back. I don't love it. It's actually kind of disturbing, but it's interesting to think back to 9/11. And I can remember good friends of mine, even at that time when the wound was still fresh for Americans, for the West, whoever you want to say, New Yorkers whose fathers were firefighters, you know what I mean? That were saying to me, even then, like in those days, like, you know what, dude, like we kind of had it coming, like saying things like that I hadn't seen, you know, which I started to, in my own politics, really started to realize with the war in Iraq and how wrongheaded that turned out to be and everything like that for myself personally.
Yeah, I agree.
But, you know, even people saying that then, like having the, you know, I don't know if you call it foresight or just being, you know, maybe not having so much skin in the game. I don't know. I don't know what that boiled down to, but, you know, people during those contemporary times saying those things, which I took exception to, you know, I was like, how can you even think that right now, you know, type of thing. But it does pose all those questions, and you do kind of see a lot of that in this first season of Galactica. And it's interesting, too, because they took this series, the sci-fi series from the 70s, where it was like a very, you know, there's a lot of common ground. You know, I think in the initial series, it was some reptilian alien race who created the Cylons, right?
Right. It was, I think what ended up, I didn't know this actually until recently. Okay. You would know better than me, but right, it's, the humans find the Cylons who were created by someone else. Right. And so which is cool in its own right. I mean, when I read that, I was like, that's fucking awesome. And they fight for 1,000 years in the original Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Holy shit. They don't even know where the Cylons came from. So there's a whole, I like this story better, but that's a cool setup.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And they took it and ran with it. And they made it more contemporary. They made it, a lot more complex, which I think is cool. But yeah, you could totally see all those things wrapped up with this. I mean, it's really, the allegorical elements are really there to, you know, as part of the story. And I think part of the relatability for those of us who remember, you know, September 11th, 2001. I mean, it's like, it's not that long ago. And it was really fresh when this was created, so.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and this is kind of a philosophical question, but I asked myself here in my notes, is there a relationship between camaraderie and high stakes? I feel like we get to see the camaraderie build really rapidly. The first season's not even 2 months long. The seasons move at different times.
That's interesting to know.
So we see them kind of develop into this. They're like an armada. They're a flotilla, basically. It's actually very similar to what the fuck are the characters called in Mass Effect that live in the that live in the flotilla, whatever. They're like a spaceborne armada.
Oh, the Reaper, not the Reaper.
That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Tali Zora or whatever is one of them, and so they have only each other to rely on. And I'm wondering, like, can the camaraderie that we see develop between everyone, can that only happen in situations like this? The only other thing I was thinking of outside of war is sports, where you really see that kind of camaraderie develop. I'm wondering what you think of just that philosophical question, because I feel like you really see it take hold in this. I think it's part of the reason why the show is so interesting. It's not like Lost, for instance, where it's about a lot of factionalism and weird shit. A lot of it is about how much these people love each other, and they only have each other. And I'm wondering what you think of that theme, and if it could be extracted under any other circumstance. I imagine it would be no. The answer would be no. It's not possible.
You know what? That's such an interesting question. That really is. And that's kind of, that sort of thing is on display in the series. So it's a great point. It's a great sort of point for conversation. But yeah, I would imagine, I always say this, like, with I know the United States. I'm American. I'm from the United States. I'm sure this is relevant to a lot of countries in the world, though. Like, I feel like, as screwed up as things feel in the United States sometimes, right? Especially in the last few years with everything that goes down. I feel like a lot of the times, my optimistic side, that there's a heart beating underneath this country that when it comes to game time is going to be on full display. And I feel like that's probably relevant to wherever you live in the world, whether you live somewhere in Asia, whether you live in England, somewhere in Europe, whether you live, I'm sure, Australia, anywhere in the world this probably exists, but I could talk, from the context of where I'm from. I feel like that. As divided as we feel sometimes, as polarized, as argumentative, as it seems like we could never, some of these contentious issues never seem to go away. I feel like the heart of me tells me that there's a heart beating underneath the surface that when push comes to shove, it's in a way like, I guess, like invincible in a way, the invulnerability or the invincibility will come out of that. And that's not even like really a nationalism telling me that. It's just a feeling, I think, and maybe that doesn't speak to where you live in the world. Maybe that speaks to human nature specifically, where it's just like when it comes down to brass tacks, when things become do or die. I love what you drawing a parallel to sports, actually, crunch time, playoffs, Super Bowl, World Series, whatever, that you kind of scrape all these little miracles together and make something happen. I think that there's something very human about that. That there's like something in people where this selflessness really kicks in, where it's about the whole, not just you or your family, it's about the whole. And I think because we're so distracted, we have so many things in life to be worried about: friends, family, jobs, careers, paying bills, all these things, responsibilities, that it only really comes out, not because it's inside of us, because that's the only time it's ever really going to come out, because there's so many distractions. There's so many different things that take our attention, that take our strength, our energy, whatever. So I think there's something really on display with that. Like, I think there's something very realistic about 47,000 plus people coming together to try to survive and eventually thrive. Like, right, there's a new baby born and they get to cross that whiteboard out for a second and do a plus one instead of a negative one, add another soul. Right. So I think there is something inherent in that. And, I think maybe it's even wrong-headed to put it in the perspective of place. I think it's just people. I think it's just Earth. I think it's just human. I think it's just humankind. I think it's just the nature of people that it really has to come down to that, that 3 seconds on the clock a moment for us to really kind of just, all chip in and just, that's, and maybe that's the optimist in me. And I'm not 100% optimist. I have a pessimistic side as well. But, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. I ask because it seemed to dovetail nicely with, I'm watching playoff hockey right now. The Islanders are on a nice little run. And what I love about hockey and the playoffs, and I think everyone feels this way about hockey playoffs, I think a lot of people feel like the playoffs in hockey are the best because you have to win, 16 games to win the championship. And it comes in sets of 7, right? And what I always love about it is that at the end of every series, no matter how many people quarreled and fought and push each other and penalties and brutal shit that happens, they all line up and they shake each other's hands at the end. And it's a tradition. It's not in the rule book. It's not something that has to happen. It's just something that does happen. And I love that they're able to, in these lower stake situations, kind of come together like that. And what I love about this situation humanity's in Battlestar Galactica is that there is no handshake line. Like, this is for all of the marbles, and thus our camaraderie is maximally important, and there is no next season. And so I love the stakes, and it feels so real for some reason. It's exactly like you said. There's something believable and real about this. Like, how do 50,000 people or 48,000 people survive? And what happens? And how do they break down? And also, what do we learn about the society they come from? And we actually learn a lot about it. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about as well, as we talk about 2 other characters that we've not touched on that are really important in Baltar and in Zarek.
Oh, sure.
I feel like we learn, especially through Zarek and the way people talk about what happened with him, that they come from a pretty illiberal society. And there's a lot of hints about how humanity is not American, let's say, in this reality, or Western. We find out, for instance, that books are banned in this society, right? They ban Zarek's books, which is unthinkable. It's a completely unthinkable thing to happen in the United States, for instance. They have labor camps. And Zarek talks about how his biography was actually smuggled out of it, that he wasn't even allowed to write while he was in the labor camp. We find out that Zarek is basically a communist. And it comes from a sort of interesting situation that his particular colony was subjugated by the other colonies, very similar to the way they collectively subjugated the Cylons. We know that the death penalty is legal in their society, which is considered by many to be very illiberal. So, knowing all of those things, which I find so fascinating, what do you think of the character of Tom Zarek? We don't know much about him yet. We learn much more about him later.
Okay, that's awesome.
But he's a freedom fighter to some and a terrorist to others. Another piece of late 20th century, early 21st century, that's a shadow from that era again. Not only talking from the clearly heinous shit that happened, like, say, Oklahoma City, but more along the lines of, like, Ruby Ridge, Waco kind of shit, where people are like, I don't know whose side was right here. And I love that they kind of deal with that. And I feel like Zarek's character introduces a lot of uncertainty that would be in a situation like this. Not only because it's so clever that there's a prison ship that is amongst this flotilla, this armada. We shouldn't call them a flotilla because it's not in the ocean. An armada. But also because it suggests, like, well, what do you do to these people? Like, what do they... they even use the term freedom points, which I think is totally intentional and totally trying to take the piss out of, like, freedom fries and all that kind of stuff from back in the day.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm going on and on. Talk to me about Zarek and what you think he introduces, because I think we learn so much about the society which the humans come from, which Zarek kind of is designed in some way, in my mind, to remind everyone that they come from a highly imperfect place that subjugated a lot of people before any of this ever happened, and that maybe now is the time to correct some of those ills, which I think is super interesting. He's more of a utopian in some way. So talk to me a little bit about Zarek.
Great character. Really threw a kind of a screwball, like a curveball into the mix, I feel like. Brilliantly played by Richard Hatch. He's a great actor. I love bringing back Apollo from the original 1970 series, and he hasn't aged much, and he's just really a reminder. He's really a great actor. I know he was a big 80s guy. He was on Fantasy Island and Love Boat and Murder, She Wrote, and he was like the character actor, just popped up all along the 80s in his younger years. It was so cool to see him, sort of reprise a role for this new iteration of Battlestar. And yeah, like, really an interesting and thoughtful character. Definitely, as you said, gives us a nice glimpse of the way the society was pre-nuclear holocaust in this world. And, we know from the philosophies he espouses that, he does have communist views. He's into, seems like he's making a case for equality, doing away with the class system.
Collectivism, yeah.
Completely, right. And that's his whole thing, and how charismatic he is. Besides introducing the fact that there's a prison ship, which was really interesting, he basically wheedles his way into. We know he's first of all, he's jailed for this alleged terrorist attack, so he is a known terrorist. But he also wheedles his way into, becoming a vice presidential candidate. Making a case for, being on the ballot, and then eventually getting, not getting his way, but telling, Madam President, that he's going to see her in the presidential race, which is in like another year or something.
Right. 6 months, I think. Yeah.
6 months. So really an interesting character. And I love the way he kind of came and went, knowing that we're going to see this guy again. This is going to be a contentious character for some of our heroes, particularly for the president. And I would imagine Commander Adama. they're going to have to deal with this guy. He's not going anywhere. And it'll be interesting, too, to see, even though, there's only tens of thousands of people, to see what kind of contingent. We already know he has one, from the goings on in this first season. But, to see how his sort of flock grows, I think it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because we learn more texture, too, about that particular transport ship. Those guys were all being transported to Caprica, I believe, or one of the other planets to for their parole hearings. So so it complicates much more when they say that. It's like, oh, like these guys might have been getting off, and now we're going to be holding them in perpetuity in this prison ship.
That's right, they do say that.
And it is complicated because Zarek is like a freedom fighter, and some of the people even in Galactica, there's an argument between, I think D talks about how he was like a freedom fighter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Adama, I think, says like he's a terrorist, and one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. I mean, it literally, it's literally a decades old saying at this point. So I do dig his inclusion in it. It brings a political aspect to it, and it also raises the question on, and this is something I have to honestly ask myself, is like, when you have 50,000 people or 48,000 people and you're running from an enemy that is literally trying to annihilate you in space, like no matter what it takes, because they're scared of you coming back, does a collectivist and even totalitarian dictatorship actually make the most sense? It's almost funny that they trend towards this egalitarianism over and over again, even though the time suggests that it's like, if I was in that situation, I would be like, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know that us having a president is relevant right now. I think maybe we should have some sort of deciding body or something, but the people with the guns and the faster than light drives and everything have all of the power. And I love how they also are all dependent on each other. Like one ship is like is making food, and one ship is dealing with Tillium, and they're all relying on each other. So I think Zarek coming in is interesting just in the sense that it asks the logical question. Like, doesn't it make the most sense to just, from everyone according to his needs, to everyone according to his needs, from everyone according to his abilities, or whatever? It seems to make the most sense in this situation.
Absolutely.
Especially because it's almost like they're in some sort of Malthusian breakdown, because you look at 48,000 people, they're not going to be able to sustain that population. The population is going to fall if they live precipitously over the decades. It's going to fall and fall and fall and fall and fall until there's not many people left, and then they're going to start building up from there again. So there's so much at play because of Zarek, and I think
make great points. Yeah. I mean, it speaks back to what we were saying earlier too, like just putting aside your differences in order to contend with a common enemy or a common threat, a common problem. We know that their monetary system is on hold, for instance. They're purely bartering, like you said, ship to ship. Right? But their money is like useless at this moment in time. They want to get back to something, but that's more than a stone's throw off. That's going to be far off. There's
actually that.
Not a
there's
priority.
That awesome scene. I don't mean to interrupt. There's an awesome scene with Hilo when he's getting off the ship, and some guy's like, "I have like 50,000 qubits," and and like tries to buy his way onto the ship. But it's
right. That's right.
It's worthless.
It's worthless.
So it's a good point you make. Yeah. Dig, I'm wondering. There are a few other things to talk about here, but we haven't. Before I get any further ahead, we haven't talked much about Gaius specifically. I'm wondering what you think about this character. So Baltar, essential character of the original Battlestar Galactica, of course. I think played pretty well here by James Callis, although I know that some people find him a little annoying. I actually think James Callis does a great job with this, and I dig his villainousness. I mean, he is completely responsible in some way for what happened, as we said earlier. And I love the scene from the miniseries where like the really sophisticated Vipers are flying in to fight the Cylons, and the Cylons are so much more powerful in getting access to the defense mainframe that they don't blow them up, they just disable their ships. And I love, like, so Gaius not only was responsible for this, but got everyone butchered. I mean, it wasn't like these guys it was some glorious orbital battle or whatever. Like, all of their shit, they say that they lost, there's 120 battlestars in which they lost like 30 of them right away, and that all of them were disabled, and they're getting reports that. And I love that when they're going in and the ships just start drifting, and it's not even like they have emergency power, like they're just done. And you think about that, and you think about all of those instances of gratuitousness, and you're like, shit, this man, it all goes back to this man, and he carries this dark secret and is at the center of the conspiracy, but also at the center of their survival. So what do you make about the kind of the irony, let's say, of this position that he's in?
Yeah, it's crazy tragic, right? You have this young, I guess, sort of this young up and coming celebrity scientist who basically betrays humanity. And I know that the original Gaius character was the same thing in the 70s series, where it was someone working on the side of the bad guys against humanity. Same idea, but I love what they did with this specific iteration of Gaius. You know, he's an interesting character for me because, yes, James Callis chews the scenery. You know, it's an interesting performance. It's a very colorful performance. I think it's a fun performance, actually. There's something about it for me. The way it works for me is that you really just want to see this guy redeem himself. Like, I just want to see this guy land on the side of good and make good for, you know, allegedly everything he's done, which I'm not sure how you go about setting that sort of thing right. But with this character, I kind of felt like I wanted to see that. Every time I got a bit of humanity from him, or some sort of human emotion besides his, you know, selfishness, I was really, you know, I was all in for that. I just wanted to see this guy by the end of the season, like, land on the side of the righteous and help our heroes. And, you know, there's a lot behind this character that's interesting because you don't really know reality from fantasy. You don't know if he's mentally unstable for a while. You don't know exactly where this character is coming from. You're really trying to get as much information as you can to make some sort of judgment call on this guy. But it's fun to watch. And, you know, he's in the thralls of this, you know, demonic woman, you know, that's, you know, and you're not even sure where she's coming from. So it's layers of questioning and just wanting some sort of redemption. But, you know, like this show does, it you know, it drags the carrot along very deliberately. You know, it strings you along for the ride, doesn't give you too much, just enough, you know, just enough to get you from episode to episode. And I think that's very clever. So he's one of the big, you know, especially the way they ended it with the character, with him and Six at the end of episode 13. I'm really intrigued to see, because I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we all do at this point. I think the irony of him being responsible for the back door being open, because you wonder what would have happened. Like, what would have the fight looked like if the Cylons showed up and they got the fight, like, straight up?
Right.
How would have that gone? I don't know. And that's what's so funny about it, is that the Cylons show an almost human-like aversion to destruction of themselves, to the point where they go through all of this trouble to eliminate everyone, when they could have just shown up and just in mass numbers and probably just fought anyway. So I love that Gaius is kind of at the center of this conspiracy, is the reason that the ships were disabled, the back door was open. We get a little bit, as you said earlier, into, and this is what's so funny, is that, and they don't show much of it, but they talk about it, is that technology was getting so crazy and everything was interconnected that the Cylons started taking advantage of that during the war. And so they started severing everything from each other. And the ship is kind of like, as you said, caught in stasis, as society has been like, oh, I think we're good now. Let's start, like, putting everything back together. We can start plugging things back in and connecting them, and the Cylons take advantage of that in 2 seconds. So I love that whole aspect of it, about the self-preservation of the Cylons,
yes,
which is strange.
It's very strange.
They do feel that way. Just the evolutionary nature of the Centurion to the Raider to the base ship, and so on and so forth. So I just love all of that, and I do love that a character like Baltar's at the center, and just a very intriguing character. I think in some way, we always talk about this, I have to, because I'm so annoying with it, but I feel like over-sexualization, I don't like it, and I feel like Battlestar really throttles that line in some way, where...
Yeah, I would agree.
I understand that Baltar and his sexual infatuation with Six is at the very center of this.
Yeah.
And it's important to remind us of that, but that's the one thing with Baltar that annoys me a little bit. Is like, come on, man, like get it together.
And he's a womanizer. That's what makes him tick, and they could take advantage of that.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, it gets to be a little gratuitous. Maybe it flirts with crossing the line with it. For me, like we always talk about the show, like it just gets annoying. Like I want to see other stuff.
Right. That's exactly the way I feel about it too. Where it's just like, come on, man,
get through with it.
Are there any other characters that you wanted to bring up before I start talking about others? I mean, we didn't talk about Ty or the Chief. We didn't talk about Duala, Gata. Anyone you want to give a shout out to? I mean, I'll start and say that I do love the CIC characters. Like I love Gata. I love Duala. I really dig these different characters. Michael Hogan's performance as Ty is really good. We get to know him a lot more later, his gruffness and stuff, and we get a lot of his heart in the end of the first season as he kind of has to step up. But anyone you want to kind of touch on? Because I know how you
I like the Colonel. Characters. I like Colonel Ty. The XO. I like the second in command. I like the fact that he seems troubled. He's got this alcohol problem. And then you find out later on in the season, like a lot of this is fueled by his home life, a wife who's unfaithful. She's a bit of a strumpet.
Yeah, definitely.
And you get to find, so you get a little more dimension on the character and just also his contentious relationship with Starbuck. That Starbuck and the Colonel are sort of always at odds. Very, really interesting character. Again, really a great character actor in Michael Hogan, a great grounding agent for the show. I think the show has a lot of that. Luckily, people that you could really hitch, that really anchor it in solid human performances with real emotion and real believable, foibles and issues and problems and conflicts. Really a great, and I love also too, just mentioning everybody like Chief or D, just having a bridge crew, having a group of techs that work on the Vipers that, seem to get down in their own little, their own little piece of the ship, that have their own little cliques of people. It feels very believable. You don't get to see that a lot in sci-fi. In Star Wars and New Hope, you get to see all the guys behind the scenes fueling the X-Wings and driving around the forklifts and stuff, but you never really get to know those characters. So to see all the different dimensions, the inner workings of the Galactica, and get all and you get a little dimension on each character, how they feel, their relationships, their love affairs, their even a little bit of their histories, which is really cool. There's a lot of characters to take into consideration, but it's done very thoughtfully. No one's really kind of thrown off. Everybody's kind of handled with again, this show, it's not a problem in the writing. I think it might be a problem with the TV budgets, with the actual physical, visual way something is brought off or not brought off so successfully. It's never with the writing with the show. I feel like the writing is just really, really strong.
Yeah, well, look, I got to give a shout out too to because I think a lot of people would enjoy this if they didn't realize that Sam Witwer's in the game, in the show. He plays Crashdown, and Sam Witwer's famous now. I mean, he did a bunch of Star Wars voice stuff. He's obviously the main character in Days Gone, which a lot of people would know. He's in
That's
Supergirl.
Right. He's great. He's a great character. I'm looking for more of him, the Crash character.
Yeah, he's interesting. You will. What I love about the teams are that everyone's kind of there's different expectations. I love that there are a few Marines on board that are left, which is cool. So they have like kind of some soldiers, and then they have or some infantry. Let's say I don't want to call a Marine a soldier, although they're not U.S. Marines. And then, of course, they have like what I love is when they're using like Callie and Chief and whatever kind of in whatever way they can. They go and they fight the fires. They go and they repair the Vipers and do all that. But I agree with you. It's a really nice point that we never, in a lot of movies or universes like this, we never really get to know the hands on deck, as it were. Or if we do, it's all about them. So it's cool to just get that. And Nikki Klein, who plays Callie, I'm especially fond of because she's not an actress anymore, but you can find her on Twitter, and she's like just a total like free speech advocate and stuff like that. She's totally,
I didn't know that,
which is interesting. And I love Alessandro Giuliani's role as Gata. I dig the smart lieutenant, the guy who crunches the numbers, who's doing the best he can, and of course Dee is really great as well.
She's great,
and her relationship with Billy is pretty cool. So. And I have to give a shout out, of course, to Donnelly Rhodes as Dr. Coddle. I think that character is awesome as well.
So
I figured
good.
that would be a character you would love. I love how his cigarette's always hanging out of his mouth.
I love it. You know, just that classic character from his first interaction with the president when he's giving her prognosis, like, with the cigarette and sort of the tough love and, you know, you better pray, like, just like really like just feels like it's, again, just like a character that feels like they're in some sort of political show rather than a sci-fi show. And they ground it. You know what I mean? And you know what else I found out, Kyle? Sort of a young, promising Viper pilot, that hot dog character, is James Olmos' son. That's Bodhi.
Oh, is it really?
Olmos, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like hot dog.
Kind of a bit-ish part. I'm expecting to see a little more. I want a little more of the pilots. Like, I want to have a little more of, like, getting to know, besides the 2 or 3 main pilots. I'd like to get to know
Wedge, so you'll get, and I love the way they're filmed out. You know, I was thinking about it, those iconic cockpit shots. We always think about Star Wars, but in reality, those come from World War II films, and it's so cool that they, you know, that's we think of Star Wars, the TIE fighter's pilot's face, or Luke, or, you know, Gold 4, whatever fucking random character you want to pull out,
right?
And I just dig that there's no better way to do it, and it's funny you brought up that. I wanted to ask you about the CG a little bit more because. And Micah and I were discussing this because I was of the mind, and she brought up a good point. I was of the mind, I'm like, this looks pretty good, like, still. And she was saying, like, well, the space scenes look great because it's all fake. And that was a good point. So there are these really awesome shots where I'm like, this is so cool, where the Viper shot's clearly fake, but they have this thing where it's almost a camera attached to the outside of the Viper, and they're getting that shot of the gun barrels, like, fighting, and so it looks like it's a real camera attached to a real Viper. There's a lot of really cool touches they do with that I think steal away from some of the shortcomings with that. But how do you feel about the effects, like both practical and special? You can tell that the show is low budget in the beginning. You can tell that they get a lot more money later on. And that'll show, I think. But how do you think everything kind of balances out in that regard?
Oh, dude, I think the space effects, like you and Mike were saying, the purely fake, you know, the purely fictional space effects are awesome. I think they really hold up, actually. The compositing stuff with seeing the colonial, with seeing rather the Cylons, the robots on the ground, and seeing it almost kind of harkens back to earlier Silicon graphics, like T2 type era. It's a little later than that, but it still feels like that a little bit. Like, it's less the visuals, maybe the lighting is a little too artificial. The movement isn't quite grounded. You don't really feel the weight of them so much. But I'll tell you what I loved about this iteration, and I don't think they did this in the 1970s version, is the way that the Colonial Vipers fly. The fact that they could be so nimble and agile, and they could be going like Mach 3 and just turn on a dime, and they have those boosters, but they also have those sort of the thrusters that could spin them 180. I don't think I've ever seen that in sci-fi before, where you have all these iconic ships in sci-fi. You have the X-Wings, you have the Vic Viper from Gradius, you have the iconic ship from Habroxia 2.
Of course.
Right?
Unnamed.
But this is like really something different. I don't think I've ever seen this in sci-fi where it's like this thing, the level of maneuverability, you could see them really sort of giving the Cylons fits with these things. You know, these things are really capable of something special that you don't often see in sci-fi. So I was really thrilled to see that. And also something they do with the sound design where it's not like pew, pew, pew type thing where it's like, it's almost like they're hearkening to the rules of the vacuum of space.
Right, exactly. Where there's no noise.
But it sounds more like actual artillery, real-world artillery rather than lasers.
Like when they show the guns, the batteries firing off a Battlestar Galactica, but the camera's on the outside, so you're hearing like...
almost like the rumble.
Yeah, it's awesome. Right? I love that you picked up on that, because I love that too. There is no sound in space. I think everyone knows that. And so what you're hearing is what you would hear in an atmosphere, and your cockpit would be pressurized, but the sound would be different. So they're kind of giving you that sound, which I think is super cool.
Very strong. Very appealing.
Yeah, it's the effects of like the movement of your ship. And I also like what you said about the Viper kind of moving around. There is no up, down, left, or right in space. Like to be able to explore like that, like to say like we're going this way and then we're just going to go down, like straight down 90 degrees.
Cool.
Like that's possible, you know, and you're going to get really disoriented, and that's why you need gyros and all of that. And we don't fly like that in space yet, but the possibility is there, and Yeah, I love seeing Apollo and Starbuck, especially kind of just working those things. And there's a lot of beautiful shots of just these great establishment shots. There's one late in the season where like a base star is in like the upper left corner of the screen, and the Battlestar Galactica is in the bottom right corner of the screen, and they're sending their artillery towards each other.
Oh, so cool.
And you see like the ships kind of just like their fighters getting closer, and their artillery, like the nukes, are getting closer. It's fucking awesome. There's like, and I'm wondering what you think of this.
Yeah.
It's getting a little dark in here again, so let me boost this up. I love that we've defaulted in our mind's eye to a naval-style battle that would happen in space. It seems to just be the recurring theme. I don't know that we can really imagine it any other way. Ships, aircraft carrier, basically, battleships and all of that.
Right.
Firing on each other, smaller Zeros and fighters and all these, things fighting each other. And it just seems natural. Like you almost have no other, the way the ships kind of sidle up to each other and fight, it just seems very naval. And I like the way that's not super uncommon. I mean, we see that a lot in Star Wars too, but they don't really concentrate on the bombardment of like the capital ships. It's really much more about like the TIE fighters and
dogfights,
the X-Wings and the dogfights. And so I dig that. I love that. I love that they use nuclear bombs. By the way, I love that the Cylons use nuclear bombs. They've not figured out not that there would really be any more powerful thing in the universe that we can imagine, maybe dark matter, but they don't know how to use anything else. They also make nuclear warheads.
That is really cool.
They also use like metallic bullets that fire a certain caliber. And they learn all that stuff from studying the captured ship, which I love.
Exactly.
I love that so much.
It's so cool. Dude, it's so cool. And they do something really cool in this too, which is another grounding element. They do something with the lighting, which would be akin to like a colored gel where, but they do it digitally, obviously, where they'll put like a red patina over a scene. They'll put a graininess over a scene. They also do a really cool thing with handheld camera in this, not just for the dogfights and the outer space battles, but just even for the interhuman relation stuff on the bridge or in one of the ships. Like they do a really cool thing that really makes it feel like a film, that really takes it to a filmic place rather than, transcends what you would normally see in TV where it's handheld, feels a little more gritty, puts you on edge a little bit. Really, really nice, just really nice filmmaking techniques in this that, make it really strong. I think make it hold up almost 20 years on.
I agree. I'm glad you brought that up because I have to give a shout out in some way. I know the show was mostly filmed, I think, in British Columbia, but they do a really good job in both the cityscapes and the woods and all of that. When the Caprica is bombed along with the rest of the colonies and destroyed, hundreds of nuclear bombs are obliterated, and it seems like maybe neutron bombs as well. I'll get into that maybe in the next season, but it remains clear. It remains unclear like how much destruction they actually did. It seems like a lot of radiation though.
Yeah.
But which would be a neutron bomb. But I love that there's like this yellow nuclear haze over everything when they're there. I'm sure that's pretty easy to do, but it's very effective because you would assume that there would be some sort of permanent glow. Maybe there wouldn't be, but you can kind of imagine like everything's hazed out, clouded out, foggy.
Absolutely.
The sun is shining through, but there's something wrong with it. I think that they do a really nice job of that, especially in the cityscapes. I kind of was studying the cityscapes as they showed them because I'm like, how the fuck did they get like so many streets empty and all of that? Where is this? I'm kind of curious to see. I'm sure it's somewhere in Canada. But
up in Canada, yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to say that as well. I dig that aesthetic. How do you feel about their uniforms and the way they present, both in their jumpsuits? They have their dress grays. Obviously, the officers wear these more naval navy blue outfits. I really dig the different iconography. So I'm curious what you think about the props. I mean, not the props, the costumes.
Yeah, they did a great job with it because they're fun, but there's some restraint in there. Like everything from their flight helmets to their sidearms. Like they feel futuristic, they feel otherworldly, but they're grounded in a reality. The handguns don't look so outlandish. Their helmets are believable. Their costumes. There was very few things that looked like college industrial design student, kid who loves corn and video games that did like, an Geiger-esque thing. Like it felt like a very well imagined, balanced place that was fun to look at, but felt believable.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they did such a nice job in the constraints of everything. I love that they built scale models of the ships, and I love that they're there. I love that there's multiple of them. I love that they can crawl in and out of the Vipers and crawl in and out of the Raiders. And I just think that there's a lot of little things that they made decisions of, especially in that time when it probably would have been easier to cut corners and maybe even cheaper to cut corners, and they don't. And I love that the various locales on the Galactica especially become characters in and of themselves. The hangar, the CIC, Adama's office, the place where they play poker, I guess like a break room or a kitchen of some sort.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that they give the show a really strong identity visually, not only through the characters, not only through the Cylons, which I actually give them a lot of credit for being kind of restrained with the Cylons. To your point, I think it would have been very easy to make these killing machines, but if you think about, and they are killing machines, but if you think about simplicity of science, infinite number crunching, they would come up with designs that were simple and fluid and the most effective possible, you would assume. So it would be this few, like, that's why I look at the base star and I'm like, this only looks like something that would have been told for them to have built from like a computer program. This isn't something some engineer, human engineer or architect or whatever put together. This is something that a computer spit out and told you this is how it's supposed to look.
Point.
You know, and I love that about the Cylons. And I think that they do a really good job of balancing their mechanical nature with their desire for humanity that I think shines through in their creation of clones, basically. And that they upload their memories to these things. I just, it's fucking crazy. The second season is awesome, and I can't wait for, oh my God, dude.
Oh, I can't
Second
wait.
season is so good.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, and it's 20 full episodes as well. But Dave,
it's longer. Okay.
Yeah, it's 20. Each of the seasons I think coming up are 20 each, I think.
Cool.
But Dig, did we not touch on anything that you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, I think we circled it pretty well. I mean, that was really, really fun. I was looking forward to this conversation. I think, so far, only one season in, I kind of put it up there with all the science fiction that it's clearly inspired by. But, like the original Battlestar, I feel like those inspirations are obvious, but it goes off in its own direction in such a way and has so much originality that it's just really, really a nice, for me, it's a nice send up to the original. And I think it went a lot further. I mean, the original was also very short-lived, high budget, short-lived. The ratings just didn't, I guess, justify the cost of the 70s version. But I love what I'm seeing so far. And we talked about in the beginning, like, the fact of you got to be careful, especially with the visuals of television sci-fi, because it's interesting. It's easy, I would say, to cross into egregiously cheesy, corny territory. But I gotta say, man, almost like it was doing it on purpose. Every time I feared it taking that trajectory, it really just brought me back and even got me more into it. Like, I could tell you, like, the first episode, 33, where they have to jump, the Colonials have to jump every 30 to, what do they call it? They call it FTL.
FTL, faster than light, yeah.
Faster than light speed.
Right.
Which is so cool, and they had to jump every 33 minutes because the Cylons would arrive every 33 minutes, and they were doing this for like 5.5 days. So the exhaustion, no one slept. I loved the whole premise of that. And then it started to flirt with crossing over the cheese line for me in episode 2 and 3, and I got a little worried. And then as soon as episode 4 hit, and I'll tell you when it was that interaction between Starbuck and Commander Adama, where she cops to being responsible for Zach Adama's murder, death, basically saying, basically Zach wasn't qualified to fly a Viper. They were romantically involved, so she passed him anyway, and he died. And she admits it. And that emotional scene between those two, I was in. That was it. From then on, you had great action in 5, where where Starbuck basically commandeers the Raider. Then you had great action later on in 10, where they go on the campaign for the trinium, for the fuel that they need, and everything in between. There's a great scene where Adama basically forgives Starbuck for everything. When she's laid up in the house, she's returned from her mission and she's laid up in the hospital, and just the political conflict between the contingents of characters and just knowing there's only tens of thousands of these people left and what are they going to do, and trying to figure out exactly what the bad guys were up to and how and why. Just really compelling stuff. Just really, really strong content. Like one of those things that's just a joy to do for the show because it gives me a chance to finally watch.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad that you've really authentically taken to it. And yeah, I love that scene with Starbuck and Adama because Adama's like, get out of my sight before, walk out of the room while you still can.
Oh, it's good stuff, man.
And then she seemingly dies. And so it's about how he's like, he can't stop looking for her, and so there's a lot of humanity in all of these different things. And of course, Ty, with his wife showing up again, really interesting, throws him back into the mix. And there's a lot here. And I actually wrote down like where we leave it. So,
okay.
Valerie sees duplicates of herself, right? On the ship. By the way, I don't think it is, but I always played around with the idea that maybe they replaced Valeria at that point, maybe one of the Sharons, because we don't see Sharon all the time, and her helmet is off at that time and all of that. So I was wondering if that. I don't think that's the case, but so Crashdown is stranded on Kobol with everyone, so like the chief or whatever. Gaius is there. Adama is holed up, shot twice, very end. You don't even know what his situation is. There's basically a coup d'etat in motion because, the Raiders stolen. Ty or Exo and Lee Adama go to the ship to arrest the president, who's in the brig now. We find out Sharon is pregnant with Hilo's child, presumably, which would be a half Cylon.
I was like, what?
So there's a lot, and Starbuck and Hilo are on Caprica still. So there's a lot to discover in this show. So I'm kind of curious, Dave, where do you think it goes next? Like, what do you want to know? What are your kind of some of your predictions that might happen?
I want to see how first of all, Adama, I mean, he's seemingly mortally wounded. So I want to see how that plays out. Super compelled by that. And then the coup or, the political divide that was in motion between ultimately the president and Lee versus everybody else. See how that plays out, and also the whole thing with Gaius walking off with 6 at the end, there's sort of a half reveal and then you're going to find out more, seeing what plays out there. The Gaius arc is very compelling for me. Again, I want to see him. You want to see him. There's a part of me that wants him to escape from the thralls of this 6 character, and just knowing how nefarious she is. And then the whole thing with the baby, with the baby at the end, seeing how that plays out. I mean, they couldn't have left. I mean, they threw so many cliffhangers at the end, but nothing felt contrived or rushed. It just felt like a proper place to leave it. So we'll want to tune in for season 2. This is really off the tone of the entire episode, but I have to say this only because it really made me laugh. And it was the only super egregious moment for me. And maybe you'll know. Right at the end of 13, like maybe 10 minutes before the show ends, there is a moment where Starbuck is fighting that iteration of 6 in the shrine or the temple or whatever after Starbuck tries to commandeer that relic. And Hilo and Boomer arrive on the scene. But while I guess 6 is momentarily distracted, Starbuck sort of dive tackles her into the pit. And this is crazy action scene, crazy fight, but then Starbuck just sort of tackles her and they fall into this hole in the ground and they land. And it cuts to this really egregious dummy of them hitting the ground. I didn't even notice
that. I got to look. Yeah.
Dude, I started belly laughing. And I was just, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh my God, we should be watching this as like a watch along.
Right.
Because I laughed for 10 minutes. Lilia came in and was like, what is happening? And I had to rewind it. I was like, watch this. You don't understand. The show they never did anything like this in the show. It's just clearly a dummy. And then later they show it, they show them laying there and it's still the same thing. It's still the same dummy. Now it's not moving. They don't show it hit the ground anymore, but it's like they couldn't. Why?
I always wonder about that stuff where it's like,
how did that make
professionals,
it?
Presumably, they can see things. And I always wonder when you see shit like that, it's like, we have no footage that we can use here. Like, that's what I always think about, because big movies always film pickups and stuff, but TV shows can't do that. It's expensive to get everyone back together. Often pickups can cost like a quarter of your budget, and So I think they go into the bays afterwards and are trying to edit this shit together. Like, we have no fucking footage of this, and we can't.
Right, they had to do something there.
That set might not even exist anymore, you know? So I always think about that sort of thing with that, because you always assume that you're not the first person to notice that.
Oh, of course.
I would imagine something as egregious as them being in the bay, editing this thing and being like, oh, man. You know? Because, like, how do they not know? You know, how do they not know? Of course they do. So I always think about, like, why. That's one of the things you'd want to sit down with a Ronald Moore or one of these other guys and be like, why is this? And how thorough you have to be in getting your shots to make sure everything's good. You know, that's why you watch dailies. So.
Absolutely, yeah. You have what do you call it? Video Village. But you know what the thing is too? Like, you have to give credit. You have to give a nod to how many things don't end up looking like that, because production is hard, man. I mean, look at animation. There's no coverage. Like, we go through that all the time. Like, that's the one thing about animation. There's no shooting coverage. There's no shooting things from other angles. If we're going to animate it 3 times, it's going to cost you animating it 3 times, you know? So that often happens in animation, where you're cobbling something together or editing an episode together, and you're like, oh, you know, like, that could have been done a lot stronger. That's really mushy. But you're kind of beholden to what you have after a bit, you know? And, you know, I have to give it credit. 13 45 to 50-minute episodes, and that was really the only thing that was, like, super egregious to me. And I was grateful for it, because it actually I haven't laughed like that probably since COVID started. So
that's awesome. That's great to hear. I'm glad that it brought you so much joy. I think
jubilant.
There's one. I'm not excited. So Peacock or NBC through Peacock is rebooting this, and that's why it's on there to begin with.
Okay.
And NBC, of course, NBC Universal. It's worth noting NBC funded this show to begin with, and it just ended up on Sci-Fi because they own Sci-Fi too. I actually often think, like, what if this show was on NBC, which I think was the intention. And if, like, would it have been too early and people been like, or would it have been something like Lost, which came out literally the next year and ended up being, although that's not that is very sci-fi, but it's not quite like this. Also very high budget. I think the Lost pilot is still the most expensive pilot ever. So,
really?
Yeah, I think it was something outrageous, like $100 million or something. It was like something outrageous.
That's another show I have to get into.
Oh, it's a great show, but save it because we'll do it for this show. So don't watch.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so I bring that up only because I think that's the one thing I'm intrigued by. I don't want them to remake it, but I just want to see how good it's going to look from a technological standpoint. Like, they will have to make no more concessions for the Cylons. They'll have to make no concessions for anything. Settings.
That's a great point.
So it'll be cool, and they'll have the proper budget, I assume, to make it happen. So that's the one exciting thing about it. Otherwise, I don't, you know, I understand it's a remake in and of itself, but they really nailed it this time.
Oh, I think it's so
you'll
good.
see. I'm excited for you. So we'll reconvene in a few weeks for the season 2, and of course we'll do episodes in between that. But Dig, before we end, let's kick it over to you for a dad joke.
All right, my friend, let's do this. This actually comes to us via Chris, our listener on Instagram. He DM'd me on Insta, and I like this one. Star Wars one.
Yeah.
Kyle, hopefully you never heard this one before. What did Yoda say when he saw himself in 4K?
I don't know.
HDMI? So stupid.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
So
I like
stupid.
that one. And it's horrible.
I had to use it. As soon as he sent it to me, I was like, I'm using this one. Just so you know, I'm using this one.
That's perfect. Well, thank you, Chris, from IG, sliding into those
Chris.
DMs. Well, Dig, thanks for your time. I appreciate your time this week, and this is
fun.
quite the it's a time sink. But I've always wanted to get through this one, and I'm glad that we're finally doing it. I know we're encouraging a lot of people in the audience to watch it for the first time. I know that Ben, our editor, is watching it for the first time.
Oh, nice, cool.
So that, or has done so. So I try to warn him when things are coming up that I don't think he's seen or played or whatever, so that he doesn't get it spoiled. So,
oh, that's a good point. That's very.
So a lot of people enjoying it together for the first time. But yeah, please go watch it on Peacock. I think you can also buy it on Amazon. I was going to just to support them, but then I was like, fuck it, I'll just get Peacock, because I think there might be a couple of. I think the Saved by the Bell show that I want to watch is on Peacock as well, and so I wanted to. Maybe I'll check that out while I have Peacock.
The original Saved by the Bell?
No, they made they did a new class in the 90s, but there's another one. And I just want to see it. I think a couple of the adults are in it as teachers or something.
Oh,
okay. So I wanted to just, I'm a Saved by the Bell guy, so I wanted to check that out.
That's interesting. I got it for Lilia Peacock for Friends or The Office. So
yeah, they're both on there, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
So we just rolled with it, my friend.
Did you get the $5 one or the $10 one? Because I can't. I just got the $10 one because I can't abide by the commercials. I can't believe it's like Hulu where you. Dude, Hulu is so. I get really annoyed with people where it's like $8 or $16 or $15, and I'm like, just pay the $15. Like, why are you sitting here watching these commercials?
So bad
for $8.
Hulu is bad. Hulu is the one that taught me not to do it, because years ago when I first got Hulu, I had that, and it just drove me up a wall. I mean, it drove me up a wall. I could not deal with it.
I really think that they make more money from, or a comparable amount of money from both, and I don't think they really give a shit if you're annoyed because they just want you to bump up anyway. But they might make more money from the ads because you figure the CPM's pretty high. Hulu's got a lot of buying power.
Yeah,
I don't know how it all works. I'm fascinated by that though, because they're still. I don't know if others do it, but I had never encountered that with any other service except for Hulu and now Peacock. Like, there's no Netflix commercial option or Amazon Prime commercial option or anything like that. So
I wonder if that's just deep. Well, I was going to say deep pockets, but Peacock is NBC Universal Comcast. I mean, their tower hovers. It's like the eye of Sauron over Philadelphia. I mean, it's like the biggest skyscraper. So I don't know. You know what? You remind me too, like, with this remake, yet another remake of Battlestar, I think a lot of these things, why we're not seeing, it just dawned on me, why we're not seeing original, more experimental, risky content and sort of rehashing existing successful things is because of these direct subscription services, Apple, Netflix, Hulu, Peacock, to fund these things. Rather than, Peacock taking a chance on a new sci-fi thing, it's like, let's just do Battlestar Galactica again.
Yeah.
I think I like the content and I love it for animation because it's keeping everybody employed, but there's something broken about it. I guess Netflix takes probably the most chances with original content. You think of things like Stranger Things.
Right. They'll also cut things quickly too. They're notorious for that.
Right. If it's not hitting.
Yeah.
So it's a conversation for another time, my friend.
Yeah, it's interesting because I am curious how it all goes for them, because it's funny talking about Hulu and NBC, just because Hulu, the original idea people might remember behind Hulu was like it was Fox and NBC and others that were all supposed to get together and do it together.
Right.
And then they finally, and they're like, oh no, we'll just do it a la carte. I'm like, you guys, come on, man. Like, why can't Fox and NBC be friends and be kinder to the audience and not have to have us subscribe to all these things? Because it's just
they really could. Yeah, it's becoming cable all over again, right? We always wished for a la carte and cable, and then we said, oh, subscription services, this will be the solution. No, we're just subscribing. I subscribe to 20 subscription services.
I do too. And speaking of that, you can support this show on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. Early ad-free access to our show. We appreciate you very much. More than 12,000 of you over there right now.
You son of a guns.
Dig. That's all we have. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show, KnockBack. We'll see you next time for more. Until then, goodbye.
Go frag yourself.
Go frag yourself.
That's not a very nice.
That's not nice. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. Stan's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.